Welcome to the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC Fight Night 240, Allen versus Curtis 2, also known as UFC Vegas 90. I'm your host, Ben Duffy of Sherdog.com. With me, as usual, is Keith Shillan, the executive producer of the Sherdog Radio Network. Keith, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, man. How you doing?
I'm doing really well. First question out of my mouth for you is, have you finally watched all of the NCAA wrestling finals?
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah, no, I definitely checked all that out. That was a top priority on my to-do list.
All right, where do you place Storace among the greatest college wrestlers of all time? Is he top 10?
Oh,
like
yeah.
Winning? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought it was a given.
He's got to be on the Mount Rushmore. I mean, you figure obviously Cael Sanderson's number one. They're undefeated. I mean, him. I mean, to me, you got to put the fours in. Like, you eliminate guys who didn't win four.
Okay, so winning four is an automatic. Like,
yeah, like Dan Gable obviously only lost one match, but he didn't win. He didn't win all of them. I mean, I know his was only going for 3 at that time because it was different back then, but people forget, and I know this is not, NCAA wrestling talk, and I apologize for my voice. I got a little bit of a cold. Carter could come back. He's still eligible. He could be the first 5-time champion. I don't think he does, but he could. But yeah, I mean, if I'm doing like a Mount Rushmore, Cael's the only no-brainer. So Cael Sanderson's on. I mean, Carter, you'd have to probably throw in Kyle Dake because he's the only guy to win in 4 different weight classes.
Mm-hmm.
And then to finish the 4th one, I mean, there's a couple of guys. It might be his teammate. It might be Aaron Brooks. May just had 2. I mean, you got Yanni. There's guys who's back in the day. I mean, only Pat Smith won 4.
Yeah.
Yeah, back in the day. Then you got Logan Stieber and Yanni, and give me one of those 4. But yeah, to me, it's probably, I think he's on it. I think Carter, that's straight. I mean, it sucks because the way it ended for him, that he didn't get the winning streak he should have had. He had to forfeit those matches at the Big Ten, where he would have had this insane winning streak, where he didn't lose since he was a freshman. But yeah, I'm a big Carter guy. I love his attitude. So.
Yeah, don't forget about the COVID red shirt 5th year. Go to AKA. Come on, man. You want to, Carter. Anyway,
well, he's coming to MMA, so he's gonna try to make an Olympic run. It's gonna be tough because he's in the same bracket as Jordan Burroughs and Kyle Dake. I mean, that's some tough sledding to win that bracket, but he could. Like, he's not out of the realm of possibility. I mean, being that he's injured, it doesn't help, but.
And that's how much we are dying to dig into UFC Vegas 90. This one's 13 fights. It's headlined by a rematch. I mean, a rematch of a real fun fight, and it's one that's even more relevant now than it was the first time they fought 3 years ago. Like, both guys are ranked higher than they would have been the first time they met. So why am I not more excited about this card? Tell me what's good on this card, Keith.
I mean, it's okay. I feel like I've been giving the UFC a pass based on how they've been stacking their pay-per-views. You stack up UFC 300, so huge, and you're the card. What's it? 2 weeks before UFC 300, it's gonna be tough. And even the good matches on this one, like Allen and Carter's probably been like, yeah, it's cool to get a fight night, but I'm sure they're also thinking like it would have been cool to be on UFC 300. So, I mean, the main event's cool. It has, title implications, especially for Allen. There's a former champion coming back. There's a couple of action fighters. So I'll give it like a C. But I'm graded on a curve.
I'm with you there as kind of the kind of wave, like sucking out away from the shore before UFC 300 hits us 2 weeks from now. Yeah, I mean, it gets a little bit of a lenient treatment, but there's certain things about this card that make it feel like, did they originally plan this to happen in Texas and they just pulled it back to the Apex for some reason? I mean, we got Alexander Hernandez, Damon Jackson, Alex Morono. So you got the triangle right there. You got, Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston, and San Antonio. We would have had Josh Van on this card, except the UFC kept trying to find him an opponent, never could. Brendan Allen's from Louisiana. If he wins, we'll claim him. There's when there's 13 fights on a card, like obviously there are going to be a certain number of fights I'm excited for on any card, whether it's a 9-fight card or 14. But once you get up past 11, I'm starting to look at, okay, what are the pointless fights on this card? Like, what are they going to make us sit through at ESPN pacing that we didn't really need? And a lot of people, including in the comment sections of our previews, arguing for these huge cards, say, well, the UFC has so many fighters on roster, they owe them a certain amount of fights. That doesn't have to be the case. Cynthia Calvillo is on 5 straight losses. There's no reason she still needs to be in the UFC. The UFC continues to sign people who lost on the Contender Series. They are demonstrably not UFC material. So, like, people talk about the UFC having 650 athletes on roster like it's a rainstorm or something that just happened to them.
Yeah. And then if you cut it down from 600 to 400, you say, oh, well, we gotta have people in case someone drops. Like, you're the UFC. You could always get somebody. There's always a manager that's willing to call you right now and say, hey, I got a guy. I got a 145 pounder I'm trying to get in the UFC. Like, this
Tyson Chartier's got a guy sleeping in his living room with a bag packed right now.
Right now. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, and you know what? If you cut it back to 400, we'd be back to like 2008.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. So listen, I want to be very clear. I know people say, oh, you don't want to watch so many fights. Don't watch. Like, listen, I get that. I get that argument. But it's also tougher to break them down. Like, it's easier to watch them than sit there and break them down. And one thing we will never have done, and other people will do this, we're not going to pretend a fight is bigger than. We're not going to be like, huge fight coming out of, like some other previews. They're good previews, but they'll do like we're not going to fake it.
No. And that's why when we say a fight or an entire card is amazing, we mean it. We're out here for ourselves. Try to make MMA into the sport we know it could be.
I think we have some good action fights though, and I think the matching is pretty equal. There's not many like slaughters on this card where it's like, oh man, this guy's gonna slaughter this guy. It's
interesting that you mentioned that because I kind of feel the same way, but there are some really wide lines on this card. So I'll be interested.
Nice. What the hell do I know?
Well, but those of you listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts won't get to see the trademark Keith's eyebrows go up at the line on some of these fights. But any other general thoughts before we jump into this one?
And people watching on YouTube also claim they can't see my eyebrows go up. So the light here don't help me out much. Yeah, I beat you guys to the joke.
First up at UFC Vegas 90 is a women's bantamweight matchup between Nora Cornolle and Melissa Dixon. Cornolle, the 34-year-old French woman, is 7-1 overall. She's 1-0 in the UFC. She debuted at UFC Paris last September, where she took a unanimous decision over Jocelyn Edwards. She'll be looking to make it 2 in a row here. I assume she just stayed in the country because she was very visible in the corner of Manon Fior in Atlantic City last Saturday, but looks to make it 2 in a row in the UFC against Dixon. A 32-year-old English woman is a perfect 6-0 as a professional. She's 1-0 in the UFC. She debuted at Fight Night Yusuf versus Barboza last October, where she took a unanimous decision over Irina Alexieva. Odds on this one? I mentioned that there are some wide lines. This is one of them. Dixon is out there minus 330, Cornolle plus 240. And I can kind of see why. And obviously, MMA math is an inexact science at best. It can be actively deceptive at worst. But here's some pseudo MMA math. Looking at both of these women's UFC debuts, Nora Cornolle barely beat Jocelyn Edwards. And Edwards came close to winning because she was the better wrestler than Cornolle. I mean, they're both strikers by preference, but Edwards was able to wrestle when she needed to, and it allowed her to take Cornolle kind of to the limit. Dixon against Alexieva, same thing. Two women who preferred to strike, and Dixon beat Alexieva specifically because she was the better wrestler and better ground fighter. That adds up to me to a fight where these two are going to square off. Dixon's going to want to box. Cornolle's going to want to do her Muay Thai, but Dixon has that whole other avenue there where if she doesn't like what she's getting on the feet, I think she's going to be able to take Cornolle down, and I'm not sure the opposite is true. Dixon, I mean, she fought Arina Alexieva, who was visibly huger than her, comes from a judo background, calls herself the Russian Ronda, and I mean, Dixon took her down. Dixon mounted her. Dixon made her pay for doing the stupid headlock throw. She looked very well capable of taking care of herself on the ground because, like, for that reason, if nothing else, I like her against Cornolle here. Like, I know Cornolle is a fairly well-credentialed Muay Thai striker. I mean, she has a number of titles and medals, at least in like French and European competitions, but I don't think she's going to starch Dixon with one combination, which means, yeah, at worst, Dixon starts taking her down. And Dixon seemed the fresher fighter in the third round of her last fight, where Cornolle did not. So all the variables here for me favor Dixon. Give me Dixon by decision here.
Yeah, before I get started, I want to just clarify something. Did she get married? Is that why, like, the UFC website calls her Mullins?
No. She got other way around. She used to be Mullins. She's now Dixon.
Oh,
the UFC needs to catch up to us. Well, either that or she married someone named Dixon. Like, okay, she may have been Melissa Mullins all along. I'm not sure which it is. So congratulations or condolences.
Her Instagram still says Mullins.
Huh. Interesting.
Either way.
It's a mystery. We'll figure it out.
Yeah. Either she's Miss Mullins, Miss Dixon, Miss Free Agent on the market for some of you single guys, or maybe some of you single guys might have missed out. Somebody, who's our relationship reporter? Like, you know what? Where's Dev? Dev, find out for that. That'll be Dev's new job. Find out who's single and who's married and who's dating. Get us the inside scoop. That's right up,
he'll be thrilled with that, I'm sure.
That's right up Dev's alley. So Melissa, as the close friends call her, yeah, she's. I mean, it's fair to say this is a little bit of a striker versus grappler. Melissa Dixon, she's a little stiff on the feet. You know, she throws a lot of single strikes, but they are straight punches down the pipe, which I like. Defensively, she lacks head movement. She backs straight up to avoid strikes. She does her best when she's the one pressing forward and she's forcing her opponent's back. That's what she wants to do. I'll give it. She's got some power. I'd say plus power. She's an intelligent fighter, so that she knows that she needs to win rounds by getting takedowns. She likes to close distance. Sometimes she just kind of grabs, which is troublesome. But when she gets chest to chest and gets those body locks, that's where she wants to be. That's her world. She also shoot on the hips. When the fight hits the ground, she advances position on the ground. Good back takes. She also likes some body locks. She wants to win by being on top, and she's got good cardio. She's going to go hard. Cornolle, I don't know. She's a Brazilian, but I feel like she should be Italian. She's a Muay Thai striker, as you mentioned. Solid power. The problem is she has those like Muay Thai defensive issues. It keeps her chin high in the air. I think she does well when she's the one initiated in clinch and lands there. She uses her strength in there, but she's such a weak defensive wrestler. I mean, Jocelyn Edwards kept taking her down. She got headlocked by Jocelyn Edwards a bunch of times, which is troublesome. If she ends up on top, though, she's got some mean ground and pound herself, and she does have a submission win. I like Dixon in this fight. I think she gets the takedowns. I think it's just, I mean, what Edwards was able to do with the takedowns, I expect her to do the same. I think she dominates on the ground. Give me Dixon by decision.
Middleweights take the cage next as Dylan Budka takes on Cesar Almeida in a matchup of alums of last season of Dana White's Contender Series. Budka, the 24-year-old Ohio native, is 7-2 overall. He fought on the Contender Series last September, taking a unanimous decision over Chad Hancom. He is stepping in here on fairly short notice. Almeida was scheduled to take on Josh Fremd. Budka comes in on about 4 weeks' notice, so take that into account. Almeida, 36-year-old Brazilian, is a perfect 4-0 as a professional. He fought on the Contender Series last August, taking a unanimous decision over Lukasz Fernando. Odds here, fairly close, but Budka is a moderate favorite. He's minus 150, Almeida plus 120. Keith, hard to see too much upside in a 36-year-old 4-0 fighter. He certainly moves like a younger man, but who knows how long that'll last. I mean, tell me what kind of upside you see in either of these guys and who you think wins on Saturday.
Yeah, as someone close to his age range, I do the opposite. I move like an older man. So, again, it's hard to get excited about a guy who's 36 making his UFC debut, but why is he getting this, 4-0 guy or getting added to the, UFC roster? Because he's a decorated kickboxer who actually holds a win in kickboxing over Alex Pereira. Now, I think they fought like 4 times and Pereira won 3 of them, but still, he has a win over Alex Pereira, so you kind of get rushed because of that. He's not Alex Pereira in the striking, so don't think you got to get that. Now, he's got a really nice straight right. He's I don't want to say, I almost said he's more of a power puncher, which would have been silly for me to say. He's not as technical as Alex Pereira. He's more of a brawler. That's what I should have said. That's what I was trying to say. He really steps into his shots. He keeps his base underneath him when he lands his shots. He's got good power, but he can load up way too much on his punches, telegraph a little bit. Now, he's also a stationary tagger, that Muay Thai style, not a lot of lateral movement. He pulls his head straight back. He won't look to wrestle. When you're shooting on his hip, he likes to defend by like landing mean downward elbows, but because of that, it gets him taken down. But to his credit, I actually was watching a video this week about Chael Sonnen saying, like, if you're joining MMA from a kickboxing background, it's hard to learn wrestling, but maybe you can learn one area of wrestling. And he said one is like either defend the initial takedown or get up. And Alex Pereira has been able to get up. And that's kind of the same thing Almeida. Almeida gets up quickly. Now, he'll give up his back to get to his feet, and he hasn't gone against this like decorated grappler yet where that's make him pay for that. But so far, so good. And if he's on top, he's got some good ground and pound. But what I like about him is he's only 24 years old. So, I mean, you got to like that. A guy from Baltimore, which home of The Wire, which just to answer a question that a lot of people like to ask, Ben hasn't finished watching The Wire, and that is why my name comes first in the Shillan and Duffy show. So that's what people have been asking. So I wanted to say that live on air for everybody.
He says that, but he's like Lucy and Peanuts, like pulling the football away. Because if I finish The Wire, it'll be because I haven't watched Band of Brothers. So just know that I'll never be good enough, guys.
A Band of Brothers are like 10 episodes, dude. It's a true story. Oh my Lord. Yeah. So if they could they could mix them together, and then get Stringer Bell and Band of Brothers or something. It'd be fantastic. Everything's on site. We should be sponsored by HBO for the amount of love I give HBO. Well, you know what? We won't be because we're doing UFC breakdowns and we're not doing the Bellator breakdowns, the new home of they call it.
They went to Max. Yeah,
they don't call it HBO Max, right?
It's just Max.
So is it not? Is HBO not called HBO anymore?
HBO is still called HBO. I mean, that's still what crackles onto the screen when you watch one of the films.
They own Max, right? Why,
yeah,
it's just called Max. Okay.
Yeah, Max is like their over-the-top platform for stuff like sports. Yeah.
Oh, no, but they have TV on there, though, right?
Yeah, they also have TV. Just like it's a separate, it's separate from like flagship HBO. Yeah,
we have to talk about HBO so long so we can put the hashtag in on the bottom to get our numbers up when people are trying to look up fights. So Budka, he's an undersized middleweight, which is kind of surprising considering he's fought at light heavyweight before. He's inexperienced. Like, he's got a lot of experience compared to Almeida, but he's inexperienced, and you really see that on the feet. He's very raw. Now he has a powerful overhand right, but he doesn't threaten with much more than that, than the overhand right. He throws kicks, but he doesn't really set him up, kind of leaves him open to counter. He backs straight up to avoid strikes. He leaves his chin high in the air. He's a wrestler, but I mean, we ain't talking about Bo Nickel here. I mean, this is a junior college guy. I tried looking up his accolades. I didn't really find much, so he didn't do much at the junior college. Just because you went to junior college wrestler doesn't mean you were some phenom wrestler. No, I'm not trying to dog the guy. I just didn't really find anything. When I've seen him fight, he likes to get the clinch, more of an upper body guy, get his opponents there, and then he'll kind of press him against the cage, then drop down on the hips. He does chain wrestle together, so I like that. I've seen him, his opponent on the Contender Series was trying to take him down. He has some pretty strong takedown defense. Once on top, he needs to improve his control. His opponents were able to get back up. But he does have 2 subs on the record, so I like that. Usually, the last match was striker versus grappler, and I went the grappler. And usually when it's, wrestler versus striker, I'm going to go wrestler, just by the odds, since we've seen our MMA, that usually favors the guy who get the fight to the ground. Add in that one is younger than the other, that kind of really tips the scales even more the one direction that I normally would go. But I'm saying normal because I'm going the opposite. I think Almeida's shown an ability to get back to his feet. I think Budka's wrestling's slightly overrated. I think Almeida gets back to his feet. And when he does, I think he batters them with strikes. And he might even get a stoppage. Do I want to go stop? No, I'm going to say decision. I'll say Almeida wins a decision.
I like the breakdown there. I like the comparison of Almeida's actual demonstrated skills in kickboxing and in MMA compared to, what you would expect when you hear, hey, a guy that has a win over Alex Pereira, because no, he's not Alex Pereira. I mean, he's not.
He's gonna find some guy like Alex Pereira's first time going into like kickboxing sparring to be like some guy who dropped out of kickboxing but beat him once in an amateur fight or something. He has a kid that bullied him in 4th grade.
No, well, I remember the first time Mike Tyson got out of prison, and for his comeback opponent, they put him against Henry Tillman, who had beat him in the Olympic trials a million years ago when he was 18 years old. And
he remembers Cedric Dubas was already his bunkmate when he went to prison.
Yeah. that definitely would have fallen under his minor record, wouldn't it? In 1990 or whatever that would have been. In Almeida.
Side note, it is funny that I'm going to get murdered for this because people freaking love this guy. They treat him like the Pope. When he says something, I've never seen a convicted rapist get so much love than Mike Tyson gets. He didn't get arrested for rape. He didn't get accused of rape. He got convicted of rape.
Yeah. Anyways,
carry on.
No,
you can call him a rapist. That's not that's your opinion. No, that's what he was convicted for.
That's okay, it's odd just kind of how maybe it's a generational thing. The people that were there when that was headline news have a harder time distancing ourselves from it, and maybe it's
and I wouldn't have the balls to say it to his face either. So I'm not gonna try to act like some tough guy.
Well, let's wait and see how the Jake Paul fight goes, and maybe I'll feel a little braver after that.
Probably still not.
Yeah, probably still not. He's. I mean, if Mike Tyson threatens to eat my children, I'm telling my kids, hey, you're on your own, guys.
I beat him once in the Nintendo Mike Tyson's Punch Out, so maybe I got shot.
Yeah. Before they recalled it because he went to prison for rape.
Oh yeah, they changed it just to Punch Out, right?
Yeah. Anyway, you look at Almeida, and from a standpoint of arsenal and finesse, he's definitely not Alex Pereira or Dustin Jacoby. He's more like what we thought we were getting when we got Bruno Silva. He's more like what Bruno Silva was like in his first couple of UFC fights. Just a guy that presents as a kickboxer, but
with 2 eyes though. He has 2 eyes though.
Well, so did Bruno Silva at the time. Talking about, where Silva, he presented as a kickboxer. They announced him as a kickboxer, but once they got in the cage, he's mostly a brawler who swung real hard with both hands and threw the occasional really hard kick. That's more of what you're going to get from Almeida. I like the upset pick here, and just to elaborate, other reasons I like it is that Budka is taking this on slightly short notice. And the good news for him is he doesn't look like a guy who has a huge weight cut to get to 185. But looking at his fight on the Contender Series, there was a lot of wrestling in that fight. And honestly, Chad Hankum was getting the better of it early. Budka started to get the better of the wrestling late. And that's kind of what defined the fight for him. But if Almeida gets back up the first couple times Budka takes him down, Budka's going to get tired. looking at the type of wrestling that we saw in that, where both guys were kind of hoisting and slamming each other, like I could see him get short notice Budka getting tired, trying to bring Almeida back down, and Budka being as kind of basic as he is on the feet, basic yet aggressive. I could see him walking right into some artillery from Almeida as well. So I'm going with the slight upset here too. I was on the fence. You pushed me across it. And I'm going to say we actually do get a finish. Give me Almeida to get the second round KO. Budka having taken him down a few times, maybe even won the first round that way, but starting to wear out, starting to have lapses on the feet. Almeida tunes him up in the second. Bantamweights take the cage next as Dan Argueta faces off against newcomer Jean Matsumoto. Argueta, the 30-year-old Chicago native by way of Albuquerque, I think by way of Southern California now. I believe he's training with Cub Swanson out there. But at any rate, he was a longtime Jackson Wink guy. He is 9-1 with 2 no contests overall. He's 1-1 with 2 no contests since joining the UFC as the outgoing LFA bantamweight champ. He's had those 2 no contests in his last 2 fights. You know, Ronnie Lawrence, and then his fight against Miles Johns overturned. So one imagines that Argueta would be thrilled just to have an actual result of some kind in this fight, but he'll look for a win against the debuting Matsumoto. Matsumoto, 24-year-old Brazilian, is a perfect 14-0 as a professional. He fought on the Contender Series last September, taking a unanimous decision over Casey Tanner. He makes his debut here, and he is nearly a 2-1 favorite. Matsumoto is out there minus 190, Argueta plus 160. Keith, talk to us for a minute about arguably the unluckiest man in the UFC, Dan Argueta, and the newcomer, Jean Matsumoto.
Zoga Zumagulov might disagree with that.
How many wives does Dan Argueta have, and is it more than he has true. No contests?
Yeah. And it wasn't like Courtney Casey also had like a bunch of like split decision losses. So I was like 4 on a record or something like that in the UFC. This is a fun fight. It really is. Two kind of action fighters. Argueta, obviously, I'm more familiar with him. He's been in the UFC for a little bit now. Southpaw, that he moves well. He's one of these guys. He keeps moving. He keeps working. That's his thing. He's got to win with output. He likes to rush the pocket and unload some big shots. The problem is he doesn't think about defense. He drops his hands. He doesn't move his head. He's very hittable. He's a good wrestler. He likes to close the distance early. He's got some nice entries. He's good at winning scrambles, but he needs to improve his own defensive wrestling. I mean, he struggles to stop the takedowns of Damian Jackson, though Damian Jackson's an underrated grappler himself. He struggles to get back up. To his credit, he showed some really good submission defense. I mean, Damian Jackson had his back for really long periods of time and couldn't get a submission. He's got some good back takes himself. He can be sloppy though and lose position, kind of rush submission taps that aren't there. He prefers like head attacks. He looks for Darce chokes, stuff like that. And he's got good cardio. He's gonna go hard all 15 minutes. Matsumoto, he's only 24. He's bounced back and forth between flyweight and bantamweight. What I've seen in this kid, he looked really good so far. Muay Thai striker, constantly flowing between stances, good footwork, moves well, very athletic. Good output, fast hands, accurate. He's got a good jab. He's got good pop. What I love, he's constantly, they mentioned this on the Contender Series, constantly attacking with combinations. He mixes punches and kicks together really well. So he'll end combinations with a kick. Throws really hard kicks. More targets the thighs, kind of old school kicker, like a very Pedro Hizzo style instead of the newer calf kicks that everyone does. He's more going higher on the kick, but he got a quick high kick. He defensively, he does some things that I'm not crazy about. He has a high guard defense, which I don't mind, but he kind of pillars the blocks, which I'm not crazy about that. What I like, he's got the cardio to press his hard striking pace the entire fight. He will sneak in a takedown. Good ground and pound. Good BJJ. He's got 5 subs on his record. If he wants to take the fight there, I like Matsumoto a lot. I get as a dog, he's tough as hell. I just think Matsumoto's too fast for him. I say he batters him with strikes. I say he stuffs a lot of Argueta's takedowns, might even end up on top of himself. But when he's on the feet, I think he butchers the legs. Give me Matsumoto by decision.
Yeah, Matsumoto's an exciting prospect. He's a guy that's, as you mentioned, bounced back and forth. I think bantamweight is probably his best weight class. I think he carries plenty of power there. His speed looks good there. His cardio looks good there. But either way, he's an exciting addition to the UFC. Argueta, he's always going to be a super fun guy to watch. And it is his aggression and some of the bad habits that you mentioned that contribute to make him as exciting as he is. Like his fight against Miles Johns was overturned to a no contest. That was originally a decision win for Johns, but Argueta made it close. It was a fight with a lot of wrestling and a lot of scrambles, and Johns was just a little tiny inch ahead in enough of those that he, won 2 out of 3 rounds in the judges' eyes. And against Ronnie Lawrence, I mean, he was doing well. It was too early to tell. It's not like Lawrence was going to go to sleep 5 seconds later and Argueta was robbed because Keith Peterson blew the call. But still, just bad run of luck for Argueta, and I don't see him turning it around here against Matsumoto for the reasons you mentioned. Just I don't think Argueta is going to be able to keep up with Matsumoto on the feet, and I don't think he's going to be able to get the fight to the ground at in the times and places of his choosing. I think him going out and looking for takedowns against Matsumoto, I don't think it's going to bear much fruit unless he wants to, pull a guard off a blown takedown like we saw Vicente Luque do this past weekend. So yeah, I think it's going to be a rough look for Argueta. I will expect Matsumoto to prevail by decision in a really fun fight where the booth is probably telling us that Matsumoto is coming near to some sort of strike record for a debuting bantamweight in the UFC, something like that. It'll be that kind of fight, but a clear decision win for Matsumoto. Strawweights are up next at UFC Fight Night 240 as Piera Rodriguez squares off against Cynthia Calvillo. Rodriguez, the 31-year-old Venezuelan, is 9-1 overall. She's 2-1 since joining the UFC out of season 5 of Dana White's Contender Series. She won her first 2 fights in the UFC over Kay Hansen and Sam Hughes before running into Jillian Robertson last April and getting tapped out late in the second round. That was her last cage appearance, so it's been 11 months, but she will look to get back in the win column against Calvillo, who will look to do the same, only with a certain amount more desperation, probably. 36-year-old American is 9-6-1 overall. She's an even 6-6-1 in the UFC. She is on a 5-fight losing streak, dating all the way back nearly 4 full years. She fought just once last year. It was at UFC 287 in April. She dropped a split decision to Lupe Godinez. Despite the miserable losing streak for Calvillo, odds are fairly close here. Rodriguez comes in at -150, Calvillo +120. Here's the thing about Cynthia Calvillo. Over the course of her career, the perception of her has been up and down, and I think she was a little overrated at her best, and I think she's probably a little underrated now. Even now, on a 5-fight losing streak, it's not like she's losing to chumps. I mean, it went Caitlin at the time, Chikagian, Jessica Andrade. So, okay, she lost to top 5 fighters, Andrea Lee, Nina Nunes, Lupe Godinez, where even there, you're still talking about kind of solid middle of the road, either flyweights or strawweights, because she's bounced back and forth trying to right the ship. Yeah. The problem isn't that she's losing to terrible fighters, is that she just looks listless and terrible. The best comparison I can come up with is she's like female Sam Alvey at this point. 1, I don't know why the UFC still has her on roster. 2, she's on this unbelievable losing streak. But the thing that's really discouraging about it is that in the course of these losses, there's just so few moments where she even looks like she's in the fight. She's just a step behind the whole time. And that's what Sam Alvey's endless losing streak always looked like to me. It's like, for the most part, he wasn't losing to terrible fighters, but just you knew what you were getting within the first 30 seconds of the fight. We're in for 15 minutes of this. That's what it feels like with Calvillo. I mean, once upon a time, when this is a woman who landed in the UFC in like her 4th fight. And before she ran into Carla Esparza for her first career loss, I mean, she had good wins on her resume. Like, she probably was legitimately a top 10-ish strawweight at the time. Just everyone, probably me too, I don't remember whether I did or not, but a lot of people seemed ready to crown her as a possible future champ. She was, at the time, under 30. She was well-rounded. She seemed fairly athletic. She was decently sized for the strawweight, and she was beating people like Joanne Wood, Jillian Robertson, like decent fighters. Like, she had the resume of a top 10 fighter. Her limitations have been exposed, and then like also everything else has just started to slide. What she has left at this point, just not much, man. Like, she's not a good wrestler anymore. She's not a very good boxer anymore. Like, just her hand speed is gone. She never had huge power. I mean, not many people at 115 have huge power, but like, her power is gone. Like, even the power to kind of stop another woman in her tracks and make her adjust her game plan is just gone. Like, everyone who's taken on Calvillo has just kind of done what they wanted, either wiped her out quick or just sort of cruised to a decision win without being in much danger. I'm not a big believer in Rodriguez's upside, but I mean, I see Rodriguez as kind of an undersized puncher with, like, pretty good power for the division, but limitations just about everywhere else. But I still think that's going to be plenty to get past Calvillo. If nothing else, Calvillo is still tough and determined. I'm not picking Rodriguez to get the finish here, but I just think she's going to throw more volume. There's going to be more zip on the punches she does land. If Calvillo decides to bring the fight to the ground, that would be the smart move. But I'm not sure she can pull it off at this point. So give me Rodriguez to win a depressing looking decision over Calvillo, and Calvillo to probably absorb like 100 head strikes and be 1 for 7 on takedown attempts.
Yeah. You started the show off by saying, about how many fights there were, and could we limit it down? And I thought you were going to ask me which fight would I drop, and this is probably the choice I'd go with. And Calvillo, you mentioned it perfectly. Like, there was so much hype on this woman. She was supposed to be the next big thing. She had this like little like bitchy attitude thing going on, and which I'm not saying that I'm saying that it's a good thing. Like, I always think about like Ronda Rousey and Joanna Jędrzejczyk, that chip on the shoulder they had.
Sure.
Yeah. Sorry, guys. But man, it has she not lived up to it. I mean, you mentioned lost 5 fights in a row. She hasn't won in nearly 4 years. She likes to box. She fights out of both stances. She has, solid volume. She likes to slip and rip, but her overall striking is pretty weak. And that's because she's just a poor athlete. She's not a great athlete. She lacks power. She throws a lot of kicks, but there's nothing special there. She's also heavy on her front foot, so she's open leg kicks. Go back to that Nina Nunes fight where Nunes was destroying her with leg kicks against someone who is also not a great athlete herself. I say Calvillo is a better grappler, and she wants a grappler, and I'd say her grappling's solid. The problem is she's such a weak wrestler that she struggles to get the fight to the ground. She will shoot, but it isn't fast. It isn't good. It isn't set up. If she gets the fight to the ground, she's got some good back takes, and she has some hard ground and pound. So Piera Rodriguez, I said this last time. On the feet, she reminds me of a Jessica Andrade style. Not the same. I'm not saying to that level, but she's an explosive fighter. That she wants to get in the pocket. She wants to unload big shots. She's got fast hand, some tight, mean power hooks. Got some big power. Though she can load up on her shots, she tends to try to land the perfect blow instead of letting it kind of come to her. She prefers to be the one marching forward and forcing her opponent on the back foot. She can wrestle. She got pretty fast entries. I love her reactionary single. She gets in there and she runs a pipe. She does that because she'll have her opponents kind of pressuring her, and she just kind of lowers her level as they come forward. Though she does need to set up her entries a little bit better. She needs to improve her own takedown defense, which was a serious issue against Jillian Robertson. When she's on top, she's got good control, but she has no submissions on her record. And a concern is she slowed down in fights. So go back to the Sam Hughes fight, she started slowing down. You sound like you were done with Calvillo. I'm kind of done with Calvillo. I will say this to her credit, and you kind of pointed this out, is she's lost to high-level fighters. She has not lost to bums. Rodriguez would be the lowest level fighter that Calvillo has lost to in the UFC. Mm-hmm. I think it happens, though. I think Rodriguez lands the better shots on the feet. I think she avoids the takedowns for Calvillo. She's going to give Calvillo the opportunities to enter because the way she loads up and swings, it's easy to drop down on her hips. I just think she does enough on the feet to win a close matchup. Give me Rodriguez. I'll say she wins by split decision.
Bantamweights are back up at UFC Vegas 90 as Alateng Heili welcomes Victor Hugo Silva to the UFC. Alateng Heili, 32-year-old from China, is 16-9-2 overall. He is 4-2-1 in the UFC. He did lose his last time out. He fought just once last year, dropping a unanimous decision to Chris Gutierrez at the Yusuf versus Barboza Fight Night in October. So he had been on a 2-fight win streak before that. He'll look to start a new one here against Silva. Silva, 31-year-old Brazilian, 24-4 overall. He fought on the Contender Series last October, tapping out Eduardo Torres with a knee bar in the second round. That was good enough to punch his ticket to the UFC, and here he debuts and is a slight favorite. Alateng Heili is plus 105, Silva around minus 130 or minus 135 as the favorite. Well, Keith, I'm going to leave it to you to explain to me why a fighter nicknamed Striker has more submissions than knockouts and won his way into the UFC with a knee bar of all things. I'll definitely leave that one to you. Tell me,
is he trained by Brad One Punch Pickett?
That's probably.
I like how you said. I think it was you. You said, yeah, because he throws one punch the whole fight.
Having said that, Striker is not the most deceptive nickname on this card. We'll get to that when we get to it. But tell me if you see any upside in Silva. Tell me who you think wins this one.
That's like Calvillo was like the Boston finisher or whatever his name is. And yeah. It's like, and he's gone decision like 15 fights in a row, some shit like that. Man, this fight, this is a tough one. I'm torn on Alateng Heili because I feel like I don't have a good read on him. On one fight he looks good, in the next fight he looks terrible. You go to like the Chad Anheliger fight. He looked great against Anheliger. Then he looked really bad against Gutierrez. Now again, that's a big step in competition. So obviously, I understand that side of that. He's a solid technical striker, but he's kind of slow. He's had times where he doesn't have much output. When he's flowing, he likes to slip kind of in and out of range, landing shots. He can be accurate. He works behind a good jab. I like his right hand. I like that he works the body. He has some good power. I mean, we saw him starch Kevin Kroom. He's got some mean leg kicks, but he doesn't check leg kicks. I always go back to it's a long time now, but Casey Kenny, whatever happened to that guy, by the way? He was pretty good. Casey Kenny murdered his legs. Chris Gutierrez butchered his legs too recently. He's pretty durable though. I mean, he took a beating from Kenny and continued to bring it. He can wrestle, he'll wrestle a little bit. He'll like snatch singles and stuff. Hugo, what I like about him is he's got a lot of experience with someone making his UFC debut. On the feet, he's very aggressive on the feet. He's a bit of a brawler. He throws a lot of wild, hard power shots. I'd say he's got plus power. He likes spinning attacks. He'll throw a lot of kicks, but often throws them without any setup. He will look for takedowns, but he's not a wrestler per se. He's more of a grappler, a strong top control. He's got 9 submission wins. He loves lower body locks. Almost got a knee bar on the Contender Series. Almost had a calf slicer. So he's fun in those exchanges. I'm so unsure on this fight. You said the betting lines were really close. I'm glad it is because I don't know who wins this one. I'm on the fence. Alateng Heili has faced the better fighters, and when he's fought lower level UFC talent, he usually wins. His question is, where is Hugo? Is he mid card? Is he lower level? I'm not sure. I'm gonna go Alateng Heili. I'll see he wins a split decision, but I have zero. This is like my least confident pick on the entire card.
This is my second least confident pick on the entire card, and I'm with you here. Victor Hugo Silva is he's a particular archetype that if you've been watching our show for any amount of time, I've talked about this type of fighter before. One that comes over specifically from Brazil, from Astra Fight Team, with fights in Aspera FC and a really good looking record, because you really never know what you're getting. Some of those fighters, because Aspera FC exists just as a vehicle to build up Astra Fight Team fighters. Like some of the mismatches they will do are bad enough that we feel guilty including him in the Fight Finder. I mean, probably their most successful graduate in recent memory was Tyler Santos, who made it all the way to a UFC title shot and is probably going to make $1 billion in PFL next year.
Some people thought she should have won that fight.
Yeah. Came fairly close to being a UFC champ, and will probably make $1 million by throwing Dakota Ditcheva into the ocean from the cage. But you also get some that just fizzle out. And I'm not sure what we have in Silva either. And I'm also with you that Alateng Heili, he's inconsistent from fight to fight, but it is generally the case that he beats the lower level fighters and comes up short against the good ones. Casey Kenny was very good. And by the way, Kenny had I think a knee surgery and a back surgery that have had him on the shelf for over 2 years now.
No, yeah, that sucks. Back surgery. Well, as soon as they say back surgery, pretty much career's done. Especially
if you're a wrestler.
Yeah.
It just changes your whole game.
Yeah, that sucks.
Yeah. So if his last fight was at UFC 265 down here in Houston, I wonder if I saw his last fight. Him and Song Yadong. Anyway, I'm leaning Alateng here as well. But you know what? If Victor Hugo Silva comes out, rings his bell with an overhand right in the first 30 seconds, spins, takes his back and chokes him out in 2 minutes, I won't be that shocked. Jury's going to be out on Victor Hugo Silva for this fight, and if he wins or loses, probably several more. I'm leaning Alateng Heili by decision here as well. Next up on the UFC Vegas 90 undercard for the vacant women's featherweight title, it is Norma Dumont versus Germaine de Randamie. I only wish that were true. It is Norma Dumont versus Germaine de Randamie at hopefully bantamweight, knock on wood. Dumont, the 33-year-old Brazilian, is 10-2 overall. She's 6-2 in the UFC. She's on a 3-fight win streak. 3 straight unanimous decision wins over Danielle Wolf, Carl Hossa, and Chelsea Chandler, dating all the way back, about 18 months. She'll look to make it 4 in a row and announce herself as, well, frankly, a title contender in the bantamweight division if she can get past de Randamie. The 39-year-old Dutch woman is 10-4 overall. She's 7-2 in the UFC. She is a former and, in fact, the inaugural featherweight champ. She was stripped of that title when she declined to defend against Chris Cyborg. She is also a former bantamweight title challenger. She took on Amanda Nunes for the title back in 2019. She has not fought since choking out Juliana Pena in October of 2020. So we are talking about 3.5 years that de Randamie has been living her best life back in Utrecht. I know that she was a career police officer. I don't know if she still is, but at least all the way up through her title run in the UFC, she was still an active working policewoman. Odds here, I do not envy the odds makers because, as I alluded to a moment ago,
good luck.
This is the hardest fight on the card for me to call. But the odds makers are reacting to the early money coming in. The early money coming in apparently believes in Dumont because she is -200 right now. De Randamie +170. Here's the problem. Well, we've got a whole bunch of problems. One problem is that Norma Dumont is 6-2 in the UFC. She has never made the bantamweight limit. She's failed to make the featherweight limit once. But we're talking about a woman in Dumont that is going to slot right in probably in the UFC's top 5 or 6 if she wins here.
Yeah.
And she's literally never made the weight before. I don't think she's made 135, 136 pounds since her pro debut, like 7 or 8 years ago. The problem on the other side for Randamie is that she's pushing 40. Like, she'll be 40 in like a month, and she hasn't fought in 3.5 years.
Just had a baby.
Congratulations, Mom Durand. Like, why is this fight happening? Why is it happening at 135? And why do I have to pick who I think is going to win? I've said this about Norma Dumont a million times. She is a black belt in Wushu Sanda. She has herself announced as a Sanda practitioner, and it doesn't matter because once the bullets start flying, she wants to clinch, throw the other woman down, and start to pound on her. That's just how her brain is wired. Like, and she's got the build for it. Obviously, she has the famous low center of gravity that makes her such a hit with the Shillan and Duffy crowd. But beyond that, I mean,
I don't know what you're talking about.
Exactly. Like, she's another fighter. Like, we can count her for Texas. Like, she'd go over just fine.
Yeah, she's fit right in Fort Worth.
But I mean, even that aside, she's strong as an ox, and just either through work or just through athletic instinct is just good, effective in the clinch, hard to push around. Not since Megan Anderson in her UFC debut has anyone really pushed Norma Dumont many places she didn't want to go. And that includes people like Felicia Spencer and Aspen Ladd, who, I mean, are bully women themselves.
Yeah.
Here's what I knew about Germaine de Randamie in 2019 and 2020. She's an elite kickboxer. Depending on whose numbers you take, she's 45-0, 47-0, 50-0, but a legit high-level kickboxer in her 20s that, kind of like her counterpart Holly Holm, like, it transferred over pretty seamlessly to MMA, and then she also picked up the ground game of MMA pretty well for someone who was a
some things.
But some things by the standards of women's bantamweight. Like, okay. She's not a
okay. That's not saying much. Okay, fair enough.
She's not a good.
That was good.
She's one of the I feel like million fighters we talk about that's a better offensive wrestler than defensive wrestler. Just, you know,
yeah.
And that's probably because offensive wrestling involves you seeing an opportunity and making a decision, whereas defensive wrestling, by its nature, involves you being forced on the defensive by what somebody else wants to do. Good grappler. I mean, she is very long and lanky and has always made good use of it. We don't love that she often likes to defend takedown attempts with a front headlock, but again, at women's bantamweight, it's been enough to stop things a lot. I'm just talking while I decide who's going to win this fight. But here's the thing. One, I could be wrong 2 weeks in a row because I said, dude, there's no way Chidi Njokuani makes 170 pounds. At least I said that in the comment section, and he made it. I don't think Norma Dumont makes 136. I mean, she's literally never done it in the UFC, and she's even missed the 145 limit. I don't think she makes it. And if she makes it, I don't know what she looks like. But if she's a reasonable approximation of the woman she is at 145, I think this matchup actually does favor her. Germaine de Randamie, to win this fight, would have to pick her apart at range for 3 rounds, or at least 2 rounds out of 3. I'm not sure she can do that on the eve of her 40th birthday. Even if de Randamie starts touching Dumont up, like starts flicking the kick out there, starts tagging her with the jab, I think Dumont just charges her, crashes the pocket, runs her to the fence. We get Norma Dumont sequences that either end up with de Randamie on the ground or in just endless stalemates, like on her knees against the fence with Dumont in her rear waist. You know what I'm talking about. Things that just eat up 2 minutes of a round. and tire her out. So give me Dumont by decision here in what's probably not going to be a banger. And, I don't know what's next for Randamie, if she's going to stick around the UFC, if she's going to go back and be a mom, she's going to fight crime on the mean streets of Utrecht. I don't know what's next, but I think she loses on Saturday.
So, or you give Dev another assignment when he's done finding out the marriage status of Melissa Dixon, then he's going to have to find out what Norma Dumont is weighing right now. Like, we want to know how much she weighs, and
just go up and ask her.
Yeah, just find out how much she weighs, and then Ben has volunteered to help her cut weight.
Dev, go up to whichever one of her cornermen looks most likely to be her boyfriend and ask him how much she weighs right now.
Yeah, find out which one would kill you first. Yeah. Germaine Randamie, I'm glad she's back. Because the division is so shallow. She's a former champion, hasn't fought in nearly 4 years. I think it's safe to assume that she isn't better at 39 than she was at 35, 36 when we last saw her.
You're saying that a week after Chris Weidman fought?
Yeah, that's true. Oh, yeah, you saw this. Maybe that's why she came back.
So Randamie by eye pokes is what we're saying.
I'll say this. I was the only person on face of the earth other than Germaine Randamie who actually believed her steroid story, that I won't fight Chris Cyborg because she constantly takes PEDs, and everyone hated her, and I actually believed her. And the reason why is this girl has kickboxed everybody. She fought Amanda Nunes, the GOAT, twice. She once boxed a man and won. So I really believe that she was standing on principle. But anyways. So what we know about her. So she's long and lengthy. I think she's still going to be pretty athletic. She always moved well. Obviously, she's an extremely decorated kickboxer. She likes to work from distance. She sets up her shots well with feints. What I like is she'll just throw her arms out there, not even throwing punches, just leaving it out there that even if you come through, you're going to have to get through. Just these little things coming in your way and messing up your vision and stuff. I like that. She's good when she commits. She's good at beating her opponents to the point of contact with strikes. Got a great right cross. She also will throw the overhand right and kind of wrap it around opponents, a jab, and she'll mix up the way she throws the right hand, which is great because you kind of don't know what angle is going to come at you. She likes to crash the pocket and lead with like uppercuts and stuff, which is so rare. She has serious power for the division, and it's probably safe to say that's the last thing that she'll lose as she gets older. Like I feel safe that she probably still has power. I mean, we saw what she did like Aspen Ladd with one punch. She likes teep kicks to kind of keep the distance. The biggest issue defensively is she, because of the Muay Thai style, she'll pull her head straight back. When she gets to the clinch, she lands knees and hard strikes in there. Well, this is where I'm going to disagree with her. So it's not much of an offensive wrestling game. She'll grab a leg, she'll counter wrestle a little bit, but it's not what she looks to initiate. I think she's an extremely weak defensive wrestler. I mean, Amanda Nunes turned into a takedown dummy in the fight, but worse is she struggles to get back up. What I will say I agree with is her submission game as when she was leaving the UFC, 4 years ago, it was the best she said. I mean, she subbed Juliana Pena in her last fight with a pretty slick guillotine. Juliana Pena dropped down on a single, and she snatched her neck up. And I don't think it was a fluke because if you recall that fight, at the end of the second round, she had a Von Flue choke in on Juliana Pena too, and it kind of ran out of time. So she might have been showing some improvements in the jiu-jitsu. Norma Dumont, and I think she's pretty well rounded. She's a technical striker that likes to fight out of both stances. She's a counter striker. I'd say quick hands, work behind a jab. I'd say it's a hard jab, attacks with combination. She likes her fade back right counter, underrated power. She likes to work the body. She's a pretty good kicking game, good defensive fighter where she parries punches well. But you said it, she also likes to get in that clinch, and she likes to grind and use her base to kind of hold her opponent against the cage. She'll look for takedowns and clinch. She can wrestle. I mean, she got takedowns against Ashley Evans Smith, against Felicia Spencer, against Aspen Ladd. she's inconsistent with it though. I mean, her wrestling did not look good against Macy Chiasson. No. If she's on top, she's good control. But if she's on bottom, she struggles to get up. I don't think that'd be an issue against Germaine de Randamie. But if she gets on top, she's got good ground and pound. I'll say this before we get into who I think's going to win. Why is this fight? Right now I'm counting it, if my count is right. This is 8th from the top.
It's second from the top of the prelims. Yeah.
Second on the top of the prelims. The co-main event is Alex, if I'm correct, and correct me wrong.
You are
Alex
correct.
Hernandez versus Damon Jackson is the co-main event.
Yep.
This should be the co-main event. I mean,
yes.
You have a former champion who, if you look, I mean, yes, I know she's been out forever, but she has won 6 out of her last 7 fights. Her lone loss during that stretch was to the GOAT, Amanda Nunes, for the title. I mean, in that stretch, she has 2 main event wins during that streak, including winning the UFC title during that streak. And her last fight, she submitted a fighter that will go on to win the title like shortly after that. So what are we doing with the order of the bouts?
But we know why. I mean,
punishing her? Is that what it is? I mean, she had a baby.
Do you remember how venomous Dana White was towards her when she refused to defend against Cyborg? Like, he flat out called her a coward.
Yeah, but I felt like that was over because she headlined against Aspen Ladd. She fought for the title. Like,
I mean, that's a good point. Like, they must have rebuilt some kind of bridges.
I think it's what it always is. It's what have you done for me lately? It is the constant. Yeah, I'm not gonna say sexist because I don't think it's sexist, but just there's women's MMA, the lighter weight classes for men, usually flyweights. It's rare for them to have fights high in the card, and they just bury them underneath the men because men are more likely to get a knockout and all that. And I think that's what happens here. And I think it's crazy. I think it should be a co-main event. You could make an argument that the winner of this match is closer to a title shot than the main event. Yeah, now, I'm not saying Germaine de Randamie should come back and get.
And the winner of that might be Brandon Allen winning his 7th straight fight in a very depleted division, and still the winner of Dumont versus de Randamie might be closer. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, Germaine de Randamie, like, she was out for a long time. She had a baby before that. She was injured. So, and there was some personal things going on. So who knows? Like, yeah, she's been out for a long time. Anybody that has a strong take on this fight or believes they know what they get from Germaine de Randamie it's silly. Like, if you get one of these, at least one of these sharps, and I understand a lot of our listeners will listen to other people's podcasts, betting investment, but that's fine, But any of those people who are like, oh, I profited in 17 units last week and I'm on a streak and this is an easy fight to pick. Like, you have no idea. Unless you're out there where you train with her, you have no idea what you're getting. I think Germaine should have the advantage in distance and Dumont should have the advantage inside. I mean, that's pretty safe to say. I think 4 years ago, Germaine de Randamie, that lady 4 years ago that we fought Juliana Pena, I think she beats Dumont of today. I just have no clue if that's the person I'm getting. As crazy as this sounds, I still think 39-year-old Germaine de Randamie has a better chance of winning the title than Norma Dumont does. But, I mean, I'm going to take her. I mean, I don't know if she's still, I don't know if she's still a police officer. You know me. I won't pick if she is a police officer. I won't pick against a police officer. I'm a police officer myself. I just won't do it. So I'm picking her for that reason alone. But also, I still think she has the higher. Again, Norma Dumont, I think, is a tough matchup. She got thrown right to the walls. I would have liked a warm-up fight. No, there really isn't warm-up fights at 135, especially because I think she's still. The hate against her is still marketable. She's one of the bigger names, and maybe the biggest name in the division, other than Juliana Pena. She's got a bigger name than Raquel Pennington. Yeah. Or, give me Germaine de Randamie to win a decision.
All right, we have our first disagreement of the card so far, and let the record show that Keith is the one who had the guts to go for the upset pick, and I do not hate it one bit. One factual bit that I should throw in for those thinking about this fight. Dumont was scheduled to fight Yana Santos back in January. That was scheduled to be at bantamweight. And while Santos withdrew from that fight, I can't remember whether she broke her nose or broke her hand, but she withdrew like a ways out from the fight, but far enough in that Dumont was definitely in camp for it. So that may help her. Like she's had a long time with kind of 135 circled somewhere on her calendar. Speaking of 39-year-olds, the top prelim at UFC Fight Night 240 features welterweight veteran Court McGee against Alex Morono. McGee, the 39-year-old Utah native, is 21-12 overall. He is 10-10 since joining the UFC as the middleweight winner of season 11 of The Ultimate Fighter. Yes, you heard me right, season 11. Worth noting that he entered the UFC as a middleweight. He is 6-8 at welterweight. And he is currently on a 2-fight losing streak, those both being first-round knockouts at the hands of Jeremiah Wells back in June of 2022. And then in his lone fight of 2023, he got knocked out in the first round by Matt Brown at UFC on ABC Rosenstrike versus Almeida. So McGee obviously badly needing a win, and he's going to face off against Morono. 33-year-old Texan is 23-9 with 1 no contest overall. He's 12-6 with 1 no contest in the UFC. He's coming in off a loss. He fought twice last year, tapped out Tim Means in May in the second round, came back in October at UFC Fight Night Dawson versus Green, and dropped a unanimous decision to Joaquin Buckley. So Morono looking to get back on track as well here. He is prohibitively favored to do so. He's not the biggest favorite on the card, but he's the biggest favorite he has ever been in his UFC career, as he is minus 350, McGee plus 250 on the comeback. I need to say this right off the bat. I've always been very forthright about, being a homer for Texas fighters in general, Houston fighters in particular. Always been forthright about ones that I know personally, not because I'm chasing clout, but because I want you to know before you invest your money on my advice, hey, I got to see this dude next weekend. But at this point, I literally train with Alex.
Oh, give us some real insight. What's his strategy?
That's what I'm saying. So I'm going to be.
Tell Alex. No one listens to the show. You can tell what his strategy is.
Well, just for example, that's why I'm going to be super.
I hope his strategy isn't training with Ben.
I'm not giving him any kind of workout.
Hey. If he wins, tell him he's got to shout you out. You're like, he turned around. You're like, hey, I want to thank Eddie and Billy. They point back to their training partners, and then just, my boy Ben Duffy.
Check out the
recap. Check out the recap show. Come on, dude. Come on, Alex. Make it happen.
Yeah, but not that anything like this is the case, but I wouldn't want to let slip something like, Alex has been limping around the gym the last couple of weeks and looking kind of fat, or anything like that. But I'll say here, Morono as the huge favorite is kind of, it makes all kinds of sense. McGee has been a fun story for a long time in the UFC. Just, incredible overachiever. He's not the kind of guy that you would have expected to have this kind of longevity, especially if you remember him back on Tough 11 telling humorous / horrifying stories about, having to be resuscitated after an overdose, or, everyone is in the Tough House drinking and just doing tough stuff. And he's like, no, man, I can't even go there, because if I drink one beer, I'm going to wake up 3 days from now with no shirt on, in a strange car 3 states away. Just shit like that. He's not the kind of guy.
It sounds like a good time.
It sounds like a great time, but doesn't sound conducive to a long career, working with your body. He's not the kind of guy you would have expected to be even competitive with top 50 welterweights as he pushes 40. But up until his last 2 fights, he had been. He's still just capable of separating the wheat from the chaff in one of the toughest divisions in the sport. Now, he's gotten knocked out in both his last 2 appearances. Those appearances are stretched out over almost 2 years. So he's he used to be a fairly busy fighter. That's trailed off. And these knockouts, these are not TKOs where Gary Copeland is flying in off the top rope as punches are clattering off his guard. No, he's been starched in his last couple fights. And his fight style always depended a bit on his chin. You know, he's never been a super athlete, always been a little slow. And he was slow when he was 29. At 39, he's going to be extra slow. He's an effective wrestler, but not a pretty one. And when he's able to get guys down, you know, still, I mean, presumably we haven't seen his top game since 2022, but at that time, still heavy top game. You know, the Crusher nickname, well-deserved. I mean, man, Court's another guy that has always had, like, I've always had a place in my heart for him. I remember seeing him fight on like literal dirt floors in Utah, like long before Tough, because I lived there at the time. He still has pound for pound the hardest handshake of any fighter I've ever met. Like, I still believe the Crusher nickname is from his handshake. But here, yeah. What's his route to victory going to be? To keep it on the feet for 3 rounds against Morono? That's not a good idea. Morono has defensive lapses on the feet, but he throws good volume and he throws hard. He throws harder than you expect for a guy his size. He could try to take Morono down, but if Morono knows that you have to take him down, he's pretty good at starting scrambles, taking your back. Like, I don't think that's going to be a safe place for McGee either. So it's just a choose your poison thing. Wells and Brown are both really hard hitters. Morono might not be on that level, but an accumulation of damage could still do it. Like, just McGee seems wobbled by everything that hits him now. Give me Morono here. I think it's going to be another first round knockout. Like, McGee might even have some moments where it looks like there's hope. Morono's gotten caught early a lot. You know, he's pretty hittable always. He's especially hittable in the early going of fights. But yeah, maybe we get a few seconds of wild brawl, but McGee's going to come out worse for it. Maybe he shoots a desperation takedown and Morono finishes pounding him out on the ground. Give me Morono by first round KO.
It would have been fantastic if you said you train with Morono and then taking McGee. Yeah, before I make my pick, I want to do the same thing you did. Like, you know, be, you know, completely transparent with my relationship with Court McGee, you know, as I used to be his heroin dealer. So, I mean,
I thought you were at least going to say you were like his parole officer or something like that. His dealer.
Yeah, I should.
It was part of a huge sting operation that kind of went all the way from Rhode Island to Utah. It was a big deal, you know?
Yeah, you said you saw him fighting on dirt floors in Utah, but it had nothing to do with MMA. Yeah, I should even make jokes about. He's a really nice story. Obviously, breaking away from being a drug addict is incredible thing to do. So many people, unfortunately, don't have that nice ending to the story. Court McGee, I mean, he's not a great athlete. Like, he's not winning any triathlons. He's a wrestler boxer, but I mean, he's really slowed down. He wasn't the fastest guy to begin with. His hands are slow. He is fairly technical. He throws tight, hard shots. He loves his straight right. He works the body. He still has some power. I mean, he showed it somewhat recently against Ruiz, Brakima, Claudia Silva. You mentioned it. He's a very physically strong guy. He likes to wrestle. He's just not a great wrestler anymore. And I don't think he was like the best wrestler to begin with, but yeah, if he gets the fight to the ground, it's by forcing his opponent back and kind of shooting when they can't sprawl, kind of one of those like cage takedown ones. He's got, you know, fairly strong takedown defense. If he gets on top, he can control and grind, heavy top pressure. We've seen him kind of stall there, kind of saving his cardio. Not much of a submission. He hasn't got a submission since 2010. But you mentioned it. I mean, you got to worry about his chin after back-to-back KO losses. And his game has always been the ability to eat shots and continue to move forward and take ground. If that can't happen, he's in big trouble. Morono high output striker, though. And you might not like hearing this. I think he's shown some signs of decline too. I mean, he gassed a little bit against Joaquin Buckley. Was never a thing for Morono. When he's on, I mean, look, I think his best performance recently was a Semelsberger fight, where he was sticking and moving, was doing really well. The issue for a guy who he's pretty athletic, he can get drawn into brawls. He likes to get in the pocket and let his hands go. He struggled a little bit to get inside against Tim Means. You mentioned he's got underrated power. Like he can crack, but he telegraphs a little. He kind of loads up. Not really a one and done kind of striker where he's going to hit you with one shot, you go down. Good kicking game. A lot of kicks. He likes spinning attacks. Defense has improved much. He's starting doing this like Dominic Cruz, bouncing his head off the center line when he's flowing. He's pretty well. I think he's a weak offensive wrestler. I think he's a weak defensive wrestler. I mean, I know he has a BJJ black belt, but it seems like everybody in MMA is now. He struggles to get off the bottom. He will toss up, to his credit. He'll chain a lot of submission attempts. He's got a pretty slick guillotine if you jump on that. I've been writing the eulogy for McGee for McGee a really long time. This time I'm just confident it's time to read it. I think Morono smokes him. I think he lands a big shot early. I think he uses movement to avoid McGee's charges. I think Morono isn't really known for his power, but he has enough where I just think McGee's body has failed him between the wars, between the things he did, extracurricular activities. The body can't hold up anymore. I think you said first round, so I'll say it makes it to the second. Morono by second round TKO.
The 6-fight main card of UFC Fight Night 240 begins, at least as the card is constituted as of the beginning of fight week, with a lightweight matchup between Trevor Peek and Charlie Campbell. Peek, the 29-year-old Alabama native, is 9-1 with one no contest overall. He is 2-1 since joining the UFC out of season 6 of Dana White's Contender Series. Fought most recently. Well, he fought 3 times last year. Let's run him down real quick. Knocked out Eric Gonzalez with a first-round buzzer beater in February. Dropped a unanimous decision to Jose Mariscal, whom we'll be talking about more in a minute, in June. Then came back at UFC 294 in October and took a unanimous decision over Muhammad Yahya. So he will look to make it 2 wins in a row at the expense of Campbell. Campbell, 28-year-old New Yorker, is 8-2 overall. He is 1-0 since joining the UFC as a veteran of season 6 of the Contender Series, though he didn't win there. He got knocked out by Chris Duncan in like 90 seconds, went back and won one fight in CFFC, then got the short notice call-up last September at Noche UFC. He stepped in for Natan Levy against Alex Reyes and knocked Reyes out in the first round. So impressive short notice debut for Campbell. He will look to build on that momentum here. He is favored to do so. Campbell minus 230, Peek plus 190. Apparently, the people out there believe there's something to Charlie Campbell, because even though he stepped in on very short notice for Natan Levy, I want to say it was like 5 days notice, he stepped in as like a minus 400 favorite. And this is a guy who lost bad on the Contender Series. Yeah. Here, he's going against Peek. He, again, is, a greater than 2-1 favorite.
Yeah, wow.
The kind of the Longo Weidman crowd has been kind of puffing Campbell up for a while, saying, keep an eye on this guy. You're going to see him in the UFC sooner than later. Sure enough, we see him, and he kind of runs against type. When you think about the guys that have come out of that camp, a long, lanky, dynamic striker is not most of what comes out of the hallowed halls of Long Island.
Just meatheads.
Pretty like bunch of short dudes with cauliflower ear and funny accents. Campbell's a whole hell of a lot of fun to watch as a striker, and here Peek is a lot of fun too. And I always like it when Peek wins, because he's another of the guys that, even though I'm American and speak multiple languages, I feel like I sometimes need subtitles to understand his English. That's always a fun experience, because he only comes from like 2 states away from me.
How many languages do you speak?
I mean, obviously English. I'm completely fluent in Spanish. My French is okay. I can read Russian off a page.
Holy Christ.
I can read Portuguese off the page. My Portuguese and Russian have both gotten a lot better since being at Sherdog.
Holy moly.
But I mean, I could and did live in South America for a couple of years speaking nothing but Spanish, and that was fine.
Wow.
So anyway, that not to brag, just to say that Trevor Peak sometimes speaks a language unto himself. But here, this to me feels like a brawler against more of a schooled kickboxer. And on top of that, Campbell is bigger. I think he's more of an athlete. This one will be a whole hell of a lot of fun for as long as it lasts, because Peak only has one speed and one gear, and it's just ripping straight forward. But I think Campbell tunes him up. Give me Campbell by second round knockout here, and I think it'll be a lot of Peak struggling to get past Campbell's jab and kicks. I think there'll be at least once where Peak charges so hard into the pocket that Campbell just kind of sidesteps and lets him run by, like stuff like that, and snipes him. But give me Campbell by a second round TKO here.
Next time we do like a Mexico City card or something, I want you to do just one prediction, just all in Spanish, the whole thing.
You got it.
and I'll be right after to be like, as you're speaking in like 10 different languages, right after I'll be like, he fights good. he's very good. I like it.
It'll be like the simple English Wikipedia.
Yeah, I like him a lot.
Yeah.
Oh my Lord. This guy's speaking Latin, the guy's speaking Korean, this guy's speaking in tongues. This guy's got it all. Yeah. Trevor Peak, this guy is as fun as anybody who's ever been in the UFC. Very aggressive fighter, fights like an absolute wild man. Though, in fairness, he was a lot more controlled against Muhammad Yahya, which is good for his career, not good for us. Like I like to just run at the guy and throw huge haymakers, punches from his hips, trying to knock the guy into next week. He does have a lot of power. I mean, all of his wins have come by KO. He rips the body with wild hooks, throws tons of uppercuts. I don't know if he knows he can throw a straight punch. Like everything's like, he fights like you give like a second grader boxing gloves and just tell them to tee off on a punching bag.
And like they just put their head down and come forward, and like the hooks are coming. Yeah. Yep.
But have two second graders, give him headgear and gloves, and it's fun as hell. So he not that I've ever done that. Not just for the record out there. He can he telegraphs his shots by loading up so much. He can overthrow his shots, which leave him open to be countered. He has a very bob and weave, but he does it so drastically, just like one way or the other, that he's going to get high kicked and kneed. He throws hard kicks himself. He will sneak in a takedown. He wrestles a lot more than you think for a wild man, because usually wild men don't wrestle, but he will. But he's not a very good wrestler. I will say his wrestling attempts, just going for him, faking him and stuff, gives him opportunities to land more on the feet. It kind of opens up his striking. If he's on top, he's got really mean ground and pound. But he's been tagged up a lot. He was hurt bad in the Contender Series. But to his credit, he showed an ability to come back. Dude can take a beating. But because of his wild man style, he's gassed out, and that's what happened against Mariscal. Campbell, he's not the best athlete. He's got a very unusual striking style, kind of little herky-jerky in his movement. But his actual striking is tight. I mean, he's got tight boxing. He's got good power. When we saw that against Reyes. Now he's been hurt. I mean, he got knocked out, but Duncan. But we don't forget that he hurt Duncan. He almost put Duncan out. So that was a good comeback by Duncan. He defends by pillaring, which I'm not. I'm not crazy about, but he lacks head movement, which is concerning. But his offense striking is good. I mean, hard kicking game, good calf kicks. Though he doesn't check leg kicks. I haven't seen too much of his grappling, but that's a very heavy grappling team he's coming from. So I think there's probably something there. Peak is so much fun, but he's too hittable for me. And Campbell can crack. I say Peak walks right into a big one and Campbell catches him. I say Campbell knocks him out in the second round.
Next up on the UFC Vegas 90 main card, the only heavyweight bout on the night, unless Norma Dumont really, really blows it, it is the debuting Valter Walker against Lukasz Brzeski. Walker, the younger brother, of course, of light heavyweight freak show Johnny Walker, 26-year-old Brazilian, by way of Russia. The Walker brothers went as different routes as you could. Johnny went to Scotland and then Ireland.
I didn't realize they were brothers.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah, didn't know that.
Yeah, the younger brother of Johnny Walker, 26 years old, fighting out of Russia. He is a perfect 11-0 as a pro. He last fought last June, winning the, I believe it was vacant at the time, Titan FC heavyweight title with a 4th round TKO of Alex Nicholson. Hooray. He had been scheduled to debut in the UFC in September against Jake Collier. Walker withdrew from that fight for unspecified reasons, didn't make it back until just now, where he will take on Brzeski. Lukasz Brzeski, 31-year-old Pole, 8-4-1 with 1 no contest overall. He is 0-3 since joining the UFC as a veteran of Dana White's Contender Series Season 5. His win on the Contender Series was overturned when he tested positive for a banned performance enhancer, and apparently he really needed that performance enhancer because he is 0-3 since. He fought twice last year, dropping a unanimous decision to Carl Williams in March, then getting knocked out in the first round by Waldo Cortez Acosta in August. He'll get his 4th shot at a first UFC win, presumably the last fight on his Contender Series deal against Walker, and he is not favored to get it done, as Walker is, I believe, the biggest favorite on the card. He is -400, Brzeski +300. All right. I mean, I alluded to this before when I said a fighter calling himself Striker who has substantially more submissions than knockouts is kind of funny. Valter Walker's nickname, if you can see his face beneath our faces right now, is the Clean Monster.
I love that.
A 6'6" guy that has to cut to make 265 pounds, and has never fought in North America, has fought exclusively in Brazil and in the CIS. I hate to cast aspersions, don't want to slander a man, but it's entirely possible that he's not the cleanest monster on the block. I don't know, but that may even have had something to do with his scheduled debut getting scrapped.
Maybe that's not what it's about. Maybe it's a like reference to like his house. Maybe he's like really spotless, vacuuming all the time and dusting and stuff. Maybe, he's just really into that. He's Windexing.
That's. I mean, the tape is pretty short on Walker, but he's not Johnny Walker from a standpoint of his approach to fighting. Like, if you're expecting a heavyweight version of this wild man who just throws flying everything, spinning everything, who injures himself doing the worm after he wins, that isn't Valter Walker. He is much more of a plodding, straightforward heavyweight. And while he's been dominant in going undefeated, he's also carried some decidedly inferior fighters the full distance. Like, I don't know if it's an approach that is going to favor success at the UFC level, as opposed to just knocking everybody out with haymakers in 40 seconds. But he's not as fun to watch as Johnny Walker. Let me just put it that way. What he is he's absolutely huge. He is pretty athletic. I mean, it's always shocking how fast Johnny moves for such a huge guy. Walker has essentially the same frame, just with an extra 45 pounds of muscle and water on it. He is surprisingly like nimble, but he's mostly just a slugger and just willing to yield kind of like clinch stalemates or just hang out at range and not throw enough volume. He won a title in a pretty important regional promotion, but it also took him 4 rounds and change to get rid of Alex Nicholson, a washed light heavyweight who was never that good.
No,
and sucks as a person.
But just for record, I think Nicholson was a champion. He won the title right before that.
Oh, okay. So it wasn't vacant I just assumed it was vacant because I don't think about Alex Nicholson until I absolutely have to. So I just assumed that the title was empty. I don't know what Walker's upside is. The UFC is clearly doing everything it can to try to set him up for success because they tried to match him with Jake Collier, who is on a skid after looking promising for a while. Now, if you're Lukasz Brzeski and this is your last chance to hang on to a UFC roster spot, that's not happy news. Brzeski is all right. If you look at his Fight Finder photo, which is right underneath our faces, he is right up there with Collier's old photo for like the most false advertising. Like the Brzeski that we've seen in the UFC is between 235 and 245, visibly soft and surprisingly unathletic. Like he's slow, not very strong. All of his opponents have kind of done to him what they wanted to. Like Martin Budai just wanted to kind of mash him in the clinch and maul him at close range. He was able to. Carl Williams boxed him up at range and took him down a few times. Waldo Cortez Acosta split his wig. Like Lukasz Brzeski is kind of a canvas that any UFC heavyweight has been able to walk up and paint what he wants on. Walker has to know that the UFC is hoping for a big splash here. He's going to come in with a certain sense of purpose. He's going to come in swinging both hands. I think he's going to knock Brzeski out really quick. I think he knocks him out probably inside of 3 minutes. Maybe say a few outrageous things, like not outrageous because they're offensive, but just outrageous because they're weird, because he still is Johnny Walker's brother, and the UFC moves forward with a potential new star on his hands. This is a weird matchup. It really is, and it's weird that it's on the main card, but this is one time where I think Dana White's instinct that, hey, everybody likes the heavyweights because they knock each other out is actually gonna hold true. Walker by first round KO.
Yeah, Brzeski. Yeah, I love you pointed out his shirt on photo. It doesn't look like what he is. It's like the girl who takes a picture of herself for like Facebook or Instagram or something, and all our pictures are from like a downward angle, just showing cleavage.
Yeah.
Which instantly, if every one of her pictures is like that, you know she's fat. Just right away. That's like the golden rule for any young guys who don't know yet. I mean, maybe you're into that, but if you're not, don't get catfished. If you're on a dating app or something, and that's all the pictures are, she's fat.
There's someone for everyone, but yeah, Lukasz Brzeski, he joins Jake Collier as like the bad Tinder date of UFC fighters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, he's not very good. I mean, he's a big guy. He marches forward with good volume. I'll say that he fights at a pace that's pretty good for heavyweight. Though in the Carl Williams fight, he gassed out, and he gassed out pretty early, which was surprising. So that's like you don't know what he's getting either. I like his hands. He's pretty fast. Nice jab. Loves his overhand right. He throws a lot of kicks. Loves teep kicks. They'll often throw him naked. Huge defensive issues. Chin high in the air. Lacks head movement. He will battle in the clinch. Will look for a takedown. Sometimes kind of trying to catch a kick to get it down. Likes to advance position on the ground. Good ground and pound. But on the bottom, he really struggles to get back up. And then the biggest issue is what happened in his last fight. You got to worry about his durability. I mean, Waldo Cortez Acosta knocked him dead. Valter Walker, I mean, the guy's only 26, so I like that. I mean, we just talked about Brzeski being big. I mean, this guy's freaking huge, 6'6". On the feet, I think you favor his striking better than I do. I think he's very raw on the feet. He does press forward. He kind of just bites on his mouthpiece and swings. He has good power though. He's got 6 TKOs. I like that when he gets too close, he likes stepping knees. He threw 2 high kicks and landed both of them against Alex Nicholson. I mean, Nicholson was pretty gassed, but it was still pretty impressive for a heavyweight to throw a high kick. He will avoid strikes, but sometimes pulling his head straight back. But a lot of times he just walks through punches and gets tagged very easily. He likes to battle in the clinch chest to chest. He battles with knees in the clinch, and he wrestles a lot, especially that Nicholson fight. I mean, he's got good entries. I give him that. He could shoot. The problem is he's not a submission threat. The fight hits the ground. He needs to improve his top control. There's times when he is on top, he's just kind of stalling, not doing much. When he lets his hands go, he has pretty powerful ground. I mean, he's a huge 6'6", 265-pound dude. So, I mean, you definitely want to be underneath him. I'm not sure about his gas tank. Like, some fights, he looks really tired. And then other ones, I'm like, yeah, he's really tired, but he's still wrestling hard. And like the Alex Nicholson fight, he was going for takedowns in the fourth. Like, by the fourth round, he probably had about 15 takedowns. So I'm like, oh, that's going to, maybe he's not, he looks exhausted, but he doesn't fight exhausted. So Brzeski, if he's going to win this one, he's going to have to kind of move and win volume. The big thing is throwing kicks is such a big part of his game. And I think that just helps Walker get him to the canvas where he doesn't want to be. He does not want to be underneath Walker. I think Brzeski struggles to get back up. I think Walker takes him down over and over again, slowly wears him out, be the bigger guy, be the best wrestler that Brzeski ever faced. I think the majority of the fight, Brzeski's on his back, where Walker wins. I'll say he gets a TKO. I'll say he gets it late in the third round from ground and pound.
All right. So 2 pretty confident picks for Walker, but with definitely different images of how it comes. So it'll be interesting to see how that one plays out. Lightweights take the cage next as Ignacio Bahamondes faces off against Christos Giagos. Bahamondes, the 26-year-old Chilean by way of Chicago, is 14-5 overall. He's 3-2 in the UFC. He did lose his last time out, dropped a unanimous decision to Ludovic Klein. That was last August at UFC on ESPN, Sandhagen versus Fonts. Prior to that, he'd been on a 3-fight win streak over Roosevelt Roberts, Rong Zhu, and Trey Ogden. So he'll look to start a new win streak against Giagos. 34-year-old LA native is 20-11 overall. He's an even 5-5 in the UFC. He fought twice last year, knocked out Ricky Glenn, like starched Ricky Glenn in April at the Pavlovich versus Blades fight night, came back in September and got tapped out in the second round by Daniel Zellhuber. Odds here heavily favor the younger man. Bahamondes is minus 325, Giagos plus 250. Keith, I'm going to toss this one to you first. Clarifying one stat I gave out, Bahamondes is 3-2 in the UFC. He's 2-1 at lightweight. I mean, he's been forced into catch weights a couple times because he failed to make weight. Then there were one time his opponent failed to make weight. So if you have any thoughts on it, like obviously give me your thoughts on the fight and tell me whether you think Bahamondes's best future actually lies at 155 or we're going to see him at welterweight sooner than later.
Probably welterweight. I mean, these guys who are super huge for the division, they always catch them, especially when they're young. Like it's going to be really hard to maintain. And I mean, who are these guys that are so much bigger than everybody, taller than everybody, that has really been all like super successful? I mean, John Jones, obviously, but who else? Usually I think the drain on their body is probably like limits them. You know what I mean? Like I think like Dan Hooker, he was too big and too draining, and a lot of guys get knocked out. Good.
I mean, Israel Adesanya was taller than just about all of his opponents, but he was never the heavier guy.
Yeah, he was built like so differently.
Yeah,
like Bahamondes is thick.
Mm-hmm. Oh, poor Giagos is like, when I got to the UFC, I was a pretty good sized lightweight, and now he's fought Daniel Zellhuber and Ignacio Bahamondes in a row.
Yeah. Why are they doing that to this poor guy?
It's like, do I need to get some lifts in my shoes or something? Like,
yeah. What's up with that? That's a good point. Yeah. So this is a tough test for Bahamondes. Giagos is one of the best fighters. Probably the best fighter he's going to face, probably other than Klein, who just fought. Giagos is a great athlete. He flows from stance, both sides of the stances. Is good volume. He fights at a high pace. He's a guy who likes to be all the way in, all the way out when he strikes. He loves explosive kind of energy draining things. Something is said about him in the past, which is concerning. he has tried to kind of knock his opponent's head off with one single shot, loading up and everything, throwing everything he has in one shot. This really zaps his cardio. When he calms it down, he reins it in a little bit. He's a good slip and rip fighter. He's fast. Underrated wrestler. If he gets on top, mean ground and pound, underrated grappler overall. He's a BJJ black belt, some good back takes, though he was subbed by Thiago Moises. Take that for what it's worth. He gets tired because of his style. And now you got to add in the durability issues because he was starched by Zuhober in his last fight. So that's concerning. Bahamondes, he's a good athlete. Long and lengthy. He's a technical striker, good output, really presses the action. He even though he's a big, long, lengthy guy, he doesn't mind getting drawn into a brawl, which doesn't benefit him due to his range. He can fight out of both stances. He likes to grab his opponent's hands, which I really love that he does for a guy who's a long, lengthy guy. That kind of where he's in range, but his opponent isn't. He can overthrow his shots a little bit, which is concerning, kind of winging his punches. But when he lets it fly, he's got good variety. He attacks with all the limbs. I like his body shots, which is a big part of his game. Nice power. He wants to be the one kind of moving forward. He doesn't want to get pushed back. He doesn't really like to fight off his back foot. But I do love when you pressure him, he'll look for step-in knees, which is always, you know how I feel about step-in knees, but especially for a longer, bigger guy, it's such a great tool. Weak offensive wrestler, you don't see much, but I'd say this, he's solid takedown defense. If taken down, he's super big and kind of gets himself back up. He swept Rongzhu and when he was taken down. He's got those long legs, so he's on his back. He can toss up triangles and arm bars. He's got a pretty good slick submission game. Uses those long arms, lock in Darce chokes, guillotines. He finished Rongzhu with the Darce choke. And in the past, he's had the cardio to go all 5 rounds on the regional scene, which obviously doesn't matter in this fight, but just something to go back to what we were talking about with the weight cutting thing. Maybe it's not having the effect that we think it is. I think it's a really fun fight. I think it's an incredible fight. I'm going to go with Bahamondes, though. He's bigger. He's younger. He's at the age where he can still improve, where Giagos is at the age where he might be declining. And there might be some signs of that after his last fight that he might be falling apart. I say to Bahamondes lands the better shots on the feet. We get some fun scrambles, maybe Bahamondes tossing up submission attempts. But I say Bahamondes wins by decision.
Yeah, and I'll throw out just one piece of clarification for any smart Alex who are headed to the comment section right now, because I knew what you meant, but it's worth noting that Giagos against Zellhuber, he ended up getting tapped out, but it was like a club and sub.
The club and sub, that's what it was.
Yeah, but Zellhuber cracked him. Giagos shot a terrible takedown, shot right into a front headlock, got Anaconda choked. But yeah, I
love when we'll talk about a card. Probably not this one, but we'll talk about a pay-per-view card. We'll go 3 hours and people like, oh, dude, you said this. You said he had 5 wins. He only has 4 wins. That other one was changed to no contest. Do your homework, chumps, with casuals. I'm like, yeah, we're casuals. We talk about this card for 3 hours.
And the prep for me to just be able to rattle this stuff at the beginning, it takes a while too.
Oh yeah, that's why you do it. That's why you do it.
That's. Hey, and I don't mind. I enjoy it, but yeah, I'm gonna miss one every once in a while. I like the breakdown there, and I specifically asked you that thing about Bahamondes's future prospects, whether it be at 155 or 170, because you came around to the point I was going to make. Aside from actually not making the weight, sometimes. Aside from that, he's shown really none of the other symptoms of a guy that's cutting too much weight. His gas tank is fine. And it's not I'm guarding my gas tank by throwing 8 strikes around. No, he's active. He's willing to wrestle. And he has good cardio nonetheless. Who knows if that'll remain the case as he pushes towards 30 and past 30. But right now, because he has a couple of losses and because he's failed to make weight, he doesn't have the same kind of prospect shine that I think his performances should indicate. Him losing his UFC debut to John Makdessi. I mean, it's great that Makdessi can show up once every 5 years.
That's weird.
That's going to go down as a weird result.
Yeah.
And then Ludovic Klein's just a very good fighter. It looked ridiculous because he was a foot shorter, but Ludovic Klein is legit. here, I find I underestimate Yago sometimes. I always think he's a little older than he is. And then when I go back and watch tape, I realize that I thought I don't appreciate how athletic he is. And I don't appreciate how well he's kept that, as he continues to go along. I think it's just because, he's been in the UFC for a long while. He's had a few injury related layoffs. I just assume that he's kind of fallen into like the Vince Pichel bin where his athleticism is gone. And it really isn't. Like, Yagos is impressive. But here, I understand why Bahamondes is the kind of favorite he is, because all the variables do seem to favor him. Even though Bahamondes is visibly the bigger guy, I have more trust in his durability in terms of cardio, as well as in terms of being able to withstand punishment. I think this might end up actually looking a little bit like the Yagos versus Zellhuber fight, where it's a fun back and forth fight. Both guys are in it, but Bahamondes cracks Yagos on the way in and either pounds him out on the ground or jumps on a sub. I'm going to say that's what happens. Give me Bahamondes by second round TKO, but I expect that we'll see Bahamondes pushed in the early going, because this is a step up for him from everyone he's fought in the UFC, except maybe Klein. And Yagos might just actually be a bigger version of Klein. Like, Bahamondes might be surprised by Yagos' speed, his power, his offensive as well as defensive wrestling, but I think Bahamondes eventually catches him, and Yagos' durability becomes the issue. So yeah, Bahamondes by second round TKO. Third from the top at UFC Fight Night 240 is a featherweight matchup between Morgan Charrier and Jose Mariscal. Charrier, the 28-year-old Frenchman, is 19-9-1 overall. He is 1-0 since joining the UFC as the outgoing Cage Warriors featherweight champ. He debuted at UFC Paris last September, knocking out Manolo Zucchini in the first round in a matchup that was frankly made to get the French fighter over, but he stepped in and did what he was supposed to. He'll get his next test here in the form of Mariscal. 31-year-old Chicago native by way of Denver. Have to make sure I get that right. Yeah, Chicago native by way of Denver is 15-6 with 1 no contest overall. He is 2-0 since joining the UFC early last year. He debuted with a unanimous decision win over Trevor Peek in June. Then came back in September at UFC 293 and had his fight with Jack Jenkins interrupted about midway through the fight when Jenkins suffered a fight-ending arm injury. Not the way he would have wanted to get his second straight win in the octagon, I'm sure, but it goes down as a win nonetheless, and he'll be looking for his third straight here against Charrier. He is not favored to do so. Charrier, minus 170. Mariscal, plus 140. Worth noting that Mariscal is a relatively short notice opponent here. Charrier had been scheduled to take on Sung-Woo Choi. Choi dropped out around the second week of March. In comes Mariscal, but he'll have almost a full month of camp before the fight. Keith, I keep being surprised when Jose Mariscal wins. He just seems like one of those fighters who's always been a solid regional guy, fought everywhere, and I always assumed that the peak of his aspirations would be to get the call up on short notice in the UFC, go 0-3 in the UFC, but at least he could tell his grandkids, hey, I fought in the UFC. Here, here's my fight kit. Here are my gloves. But he's 2-0. He beat Trevor Peek up a weight class. And yeah, the Jack Jenkins fight was weird, but he got his hand raised.
I think he took the Peek fight on really short notice too, didn't he?
Yeah. Should have mentioned that. He took the Peek fight on, it had to be less than a week's notice, because I don't think we previewed.
No, I think it was
Mariscal versus Peek. Yeah. It was during fight week. So he came in on short notice, up a weight class, and held his own against Peek. So
yeah,
does he continue?
Yeah, I'll say this about him. He the reason why he's having success so far. I mean, I understand, the Jenkins fight, take it what it's worth, but the Peek one, why he can come on short notice and be successful is because he has fought a lot of guys in the regional scene, fought good guys in the regional scene. He's got a lot of experience. So he kind of came into the UFC with kind of how a lot of people will try to avoid taking losses on the regional scene. And I think that hurts you in the long run. He's fought a lot of good guys. So he fights out of both stances. He switches stance a lot, fights with a lot of pressure, really good output. I like that he appears to kind of be having fun out there when he's fighting. He loves to do like some misdirection thing. He'll be like fighting like this. He'll throw his hand over this way and punch that way. He'll throw a lot of spinning attacks. He really leaps into his punches to land some shots, but throws really kind of winging punches. Bit of a wild man. He loves a brawl. He wants to be in there. He's a tough dude. He's a dog. He'll eat a punch to land some of his own. He mixes punches and kicks together well. Mean kicking game. Good at chopping his opponent's legs. He closes the distance and does well with his dirty boxing. He's got a judo background. He will look for some takedowns. Will shoot, likes upper body takedowns. Also, he will throw some judo throws. Mean ground and pound. Get some wild scrambles. One of these guys, he's willing to lose position to. Look for a sub. He'll roll underneath something, which often won't work in the UFC. He's got 3 submission wins. One thing I didn't say, he's got some pretty decent, strong, dirty boxing in the clinch. Sharir, he's a really solid striker, very patient. To a fault sometimes, get a little bit trigger shy, but he's got quick hands, tight boxing. I like his left hook, has serious power in his hands, got 10 TKOs. He's got heavy kicks. Dropped some opponents in the past with calf kicks, though sometimes he'll throw them naked. He does check leg kicks, which I like. Not a great offensive wrestler, but he's a solid grappler. If the fight gets to the ground, he's got 3 subs, and he's hard to take down himself. This is a fun fight. Do I think it should be this high up the card based on what these guys have done in the UFC? No, probably not. But you said Sharir is the favorite, right?
Yes, he's minus 170, Mariscal plus 140.
Okay, I'm glad that it's closer than, because I thought Sharir, because his pedigree and everything, and he's got the better record, and I thought he was going to be a big favorite, and I'm glad. He's the more polished fighter. He has the more power. But Mariscal's going to stay in his face. He's going to make it a fight. And can Sharir fight that style? With Mariscal's landing shots. I've flip-flopped on this one. That's why. I wish you went first.
I mean, I'll spoil and tell you who I think is going to win.
No. So... he looks so much cleaner. A gut thing keeps telling me that to pick Mariscal. I mean, he's a dog, and I don't know if Sharir, because he has that dog in it. You know what? I'm gonna go with Sharir. He's more tactical. He definitely has the more upside. He's going to have to avoid some takedowns and the volume. He's going to have to up his own volume instead of being, looking for the perfect shot. He's going to have to exchange in the pocket and don't give away rounds. I'm going to say it's super close. I think Mariscal is going to do his thing and make it nasty, but I'll say Sharir wins a split decision.
Yeah, I love the breakdown there. And it's interesting because, some of what you said about Mariscal, I think similarly about Sharir. I mean, you look at his record; he's 19-9. He was 18-9 when he got to the UFC, but he fought everywhere. He's fought up and down weight classes. He's fought good dudes on the way up. Like you look at his record.
What am I talking about? Saying he's got a clean record? What the hell am I talking about? Like for some reason, I thought his record was much better than 19-9. Sorry
like, I mean, he has a win over William Gomez, who that's aged well because Gomez is 3-0 in the UFC right now and like looking like maybe France's next star. He losses to like people like Saladin Parnasse, who's an outstanding prospect, like lost to Soren Bach, who, I mean, Soren Bach
Paul
is
Hughes.
Yeah, Paul Hughes. And
Who
Paul Hughes,
in love with.
Everyone's in love with Paul Hughes. And both Hughes and Bach are way bigger than Charrier also.
Yeah.
Like Bach is
just bring Hughes into the UFC already, so I have to stop hearing about him.
Like, that's for you, Sean Sheehan.
No, it's not just everybody.
No, like
when's he gonna get signed? Like, I don't know.
Yeah. But, you know, obviously they matched Charrier up with Manolo Zucchini in Paris. Zucchini was not a UFC level fighter, and they just did that to get the French guy a win in France. I have no problem with that. I like that they matched him up with Sung Woo Choi for his next fight because I thought, okay, that's the UFC going, okay, you're in. Let's match you up with someone that'll probably give us a pretty fun fight and we can see what you've actually got. When he falls off and they replace him with Jose Mariscal, it's almost even more the case because Mariscal is more aggressive than Choi. And like you said, he's a dog. He's not going to let Charrier fight the kind of measured technical striking match that he would rather fight. And I can see this going one of two ways. I could see it going where Mariscal is just throwing more volume. He's constantly in Charrier's face. And even if neither guy's hurting the other real bad, it's just going to look to the judges like Mariscal is winning, and he's going to be winning. He's going to be outlanding him. He's going to be putting him on the defensive. Or it could be one of those things where the first couple times Mariscal comes crashing in, Charrier just, blisters him and slides out of the pocket. And we're going to realize that Mariscal is outclassed and, he's going to look like he's been hit by a truck at the end of the fight. Not finished because he's such a tough dude and he'll keep coming forward. But I see it that way. Like definitely in boxing, they'd call it a boxer versus puncher, like say a striker versus brawler. I've been back and forth on this one as well. I'm leaning Charrier, but without a whole lot of confidence. I'm pretty sure this one goes the distance. And it could even be one of those ones where scorecards are all over the place based on what you favor. But I think the basic dynamic of Mariscal just coming forward relentlessly, throwing lots of volume and throwing lots of heat is probably going to hold true. And it'll just be interesting to see, who comes out looking better from it. That brings us to the co-main event of UFC Fight Night 240, a featherweight matchup between Alexander Hernandez and Damon Jackson. It is Texas versus Texas. It's LFA versus LFA, San Antonio versus DFW. It's what we've all been clamoring. I don't know if we've all been clamoring for it, but it's a fun fight. Hernandez, 31-year-old from San Antonio, fighting out of Denver, is 14-7 overall. He's an even 6-6 in the UFC. Worth noting that he's 0-1 at featherweight. He went 6-5 at lightweight with some impressive highlights, some bad losses, decided to drop to 145 pounds, where he debuted at Fight Night Dawson versus Green last October, dropped a unanimous decision to Bill Algeo. So he decided nonetheless to continue trying his luck at 145 pounds. He'll look to get his first win in that weight division against Jackson. Jackson, 35-year-old Dallas native, fighting out of Dallas, is 22-6-1 with one no contest overall. He's 5-4-1 with one no contest across multiple stints in the UFC. I mean, he fought in the UFC all the way back in like 2015. I think he went 0-1-1 or something, but he is 5-3 since being back. That includes a pretty impressive 4-fight win streak, ending in his kind of emotional lamping of Pat Sabatini, right after his brother passed away. But since then, it has been bad news as he's gotten knocked out by Dan Ige and dropped a unanimous decision to Billy Quarantillo in his 2 cage appearances of 2023. So he's looking to snap his first octagon losing streak. He is not favored to get it done. Hernandez, -190, Jackson +160 on the comeback. I'll jump right on this grenade. I said going into Hernandez's featherweight debut against Aljo last fall that I thought it was a terrible move by Hernandez. I mean, I'm not his manager. I'm not his coach. I've never set foot in Factory X, but even from where I sit, I can see that dropping to 145 pounds was not going to fix any of the things that are wrong with Alexander Hernandez. And in fact, was going to make all of them worse. Hernandez's problems in the UFC have primarily had to do with durability and output. Neither of those are improved when you take an already jacked lightweight and drop to 145 pounds. I will say that he looked impressive during fight week and on the scale last October. Like he looked like he'd actually done the proper work to kind of retool his body for the new weight class. That was heartening, but he was taking on a guy in Bill Aljo that was just going to be poison for him. Aljo is a well-rounded, tough fighter who has picked up quite a few wins by suffering some punishment, outlasting his opponent, and taking over late. It's the way that Billy Quarantillo beat Hernandez. It's the way that Aljo really beat Hernandez. Unfortunately for Hernandez, that's also Damon Jackson's calling card. I get that his nickname is now Jackson, Action Jackson. It rhymes. It makes me think of that movie with Carl Weathers back in the 80s or 90s. But you know what? I liked when his nickname was the Leech because that was a much better description of his fight style. For a guy that actually has at least a junior college wrestling background and is a very effective MMA wrestler, like it's persistence-based takedowns. Damon Jackson is not a plus athlete, and he's a tall, long, and lanky guy for the division. So he's not shooting cannonball double legs through a guy's hips. He's getting the hold of a single, and he's not letting that leg go for the next 45 seconds as he chains his takedown attempts, finally hauls the guy down or takes his back standing, and they kind of crumple to the canvas. He grapples like a leech. He just sticks onto you, sucks all the blood out of you. It's a shame that he's Action Jackson, but here, the things that made Hernandez good and interesting and dangerous at lightweight are still present. He's still a plus athlete. I mean, he's an outstanding athlete. He hits super hard. Part of the reason that his record is so spotty in the UFC is because he debuted by starching Beneil Dariush and then beating Olivier Aubin-Mercier, 2 wins that aged extremely well for him. But from there, he became the kind of guy that could never take a step back. Anytime he wins a fight, he gets a top 15-ish opponent in his next fight. You just look at it, loses to Donald Cerrone, wins a terrible fight against Ronaldo, gets Drew Dober, loses to him, wins a fight, gets Thiago Moises. Like just Hernandez kind of like bouncing against the ceiling at 155, but none of that's going to change at 145. And he certainly could starch Jackson. What Dan Ige did to Damon Jackson, Alexander Hernandez could absolutely do that. That's right in his playbook. Bouncing into range on the taller guy, just getting past the jab or eating the jab and just clocking him with an overhand right. He can do that. But I think that's the outside chance. I'm surprised that Hernandez is this big a favorite because I think Hernandez could knock Jackson out early, but if he doesn't, this fight favors Jackson with each minute that goes by. Hernandez is a good offensive wrestler when he wants to be. Like he has a good shot because he is athletic. He's good at finishing with just power, with horsepower, and instead of chaining or using technique. Another part of his gas tank woes, but he's not as good a defensive wrestler, especially when he gets tired. And then he's in Jackson's world. Jackson can do Damon Jackson things. I mean, he could do what he does for 10 rounds. Easy. He only has to do it for 3 rounds here. I'm going to say Hernandez makes it to the final horn, but If Jackson ends up tapping out an exhausted Hernandez in the third round, that wouldn't shock me either. Give me Damon Jackson in the upset here by decision.
Yeah, this is intriguing. Do I think it should be this high up the card? No. So Alex Hernandez, yeah, I think that was a great point you said about like it's early on in his UFC career he got that big upset win and then it was just off to the races and he couldn't back down. And that was a really good point. This is kind of where he should have always been, like a mid, even though this is a co-main event, but like the mid card level kind of guy. He's a boxer with fairly quick hands, pretty accurate. He's good at measuring his shots. He attacks with combination, mixes punches to the body and the head together in combination. Does well to kind of dart in and out of range to not get countered. He has good power, though he can load up a little bit, so he gasses. I love that you point out that Billy Cornolle just sucked the life out of him with his cardio and his pace. His cardio has looked much better at 155 than 145. He showed, against Jim Miller, like he's hurt early in the fight, didn't panic. Despite Miller was tagging off a little bit, he found a way to win. He can't do that 145. And Aljo did the same thing, not to the pace that Cornolle did, but same thing. He was able to put a pace on him and kind of drain him out. He's got good kicks, probably the best part of his game. He mixes his kicks and punches together well. He can wrestle, can win scrambles, but can he do that for long points at 145? Damon Jackson, he's a long and lengthy fighter. You mentioned him not being a good. He's from Fort Worth.
He's from Dallas Fort Worth. Like he's definitely from the Metroplex.
He could check out like the stockyards and like you know what, not being a good athlete. Like so I don't know if they do this at all Rodeos, but the one in Fort Worth, it's pretty cool. They like my son was in they take all the little kids and they can go in the arena and they like tie a ribbon up to like a goat or something or a sheep or something and they have to like chase them around.
That's so much fun to watch the kids stumbling around after.
Yeah, trying to get a ribbon. It's like there's like you can throw Damian Jackson and he might not win it. Like that's how bad of an athlete he is.
Right. Yeah, but he could probably like tie up a calf that weighs like 300 pounds and just like drag it out, no problem. Like he's got farm boy strength. He's not going to be dunking a basketball. Yeah,
like he would lose to a bunch of 9-year-olds trying to chase down the sheep to get the ribbon off. But the dude's super tough. He's insanely tough. Won't stop fighting. Great volume. Fights at like a nonstop pace. The only time I haven't seen him do that was against Dan Ige. That might have been a little, I don't want to say starstruck, but like you got up to a higher level and you change the way you approach fights, which I don't think was the way he should have fought. Does well.
It was trying to follow up the biggest win of his career, such an emotional win, and he was in a fight where he might have made the UFC top 10 if he beat Ige. Like that's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
He does well to kind of keep, if he wants to work from distance, kind of use long range. He's got a huge kicking game. The issue is with him, defense is not a strong suit. He keeps he stands tall. He keeps his chin high in the air. Dan Ige clocked him bad. He throws a lot of naked leg kicks with open, leaves an open encounter. You mentioned he's an underrated wrestler. He likes to drop down on the hips, press the action. I always go back to the Charles Rosa fight where he got 6 takedowns. More impressive what he did to Dan Argueta. He ragdolled Dan Argueta. He should have wrestled Dan Ige more. He abandoned his wrestling against Dan Ige, though Dan Ige is a really underrated grappler himself. Yeah. He's a weak defensive wrestler. Like Mirsad, I'm going back a while when Mirsad Bektic got 7 takedowns on him, especially because he's a guy he'll jump guillotine, and he has a good guillotine. But it's
he ended up guillotining Bektic, but like he got taken out a million times on his way.
Yeah, but he was more of like Bektic was gassing out, and he's an underrated grappler. You mentioned like he's got a slick submission game, good back takes, good cardio. I mean, he broke Mirsad Bektic on 3 days' notice from his cardio. Though he did surprisingly, he was breathing pretty hard against Dan Argueta, but I kind of think that's like an outlier. Like I think that's an exception to the rule. So Hernandez fought Billy Cornolle, and the pressure got to him. Bill Algeo, the pressure got to him. I don't understand why it won't be any different now. I expect to see the same thing. I expect Jackson to stay in his face, tons of kicks, tons of takedown attempts. I could see Hernandez winning the first round, maybe be winning halfway through the second, and Jackson starts taking over. I say Jackson wins the second and third, and give me Jackson by decision.
With that, we come to the main event of UFC Fight Night 240, a rematch at middleweight between Brendan Allen and Chris Curtis. Allen, the 28-year-old Louisiana native by way of South Florida, is 23-5 overall. He is 11-2 since joining the UFC out of season 3 of Dana White's Contender Series. He is on a 6-fight win streak dating all the way back to the beginning of 2022. He fought 3 times last year, 3 wins, 3 rear naked chokes. The victims, Andre Muniz, Bruno Silva, and Paul Craig. The last of those, the Craig fight, was in the headliner of UFC Fight Night 232 in November. So Allen will look to make it 7 in a row. He had been scheduled to take on Marvin Vettori. Vettori withdrew from the card with, I believe, an injury on March 14th. So on about 3 weeks' notice, in steps the last man to beat him before the beginning of that win streak in the form of Curtis. 36-year-old Cincinnati native is 31-10 with 1 no contest overall. He's 5-2 with 1 no contest since joining the UFC as a veteran of just about every regional promotion you can name, as well as PFL. He is coming in off a win, took a split decision over Marc-Andre Barrio back in January at UFC 297. Prior to that, he fought twice in 2023, losing a decision to Kelvin Gastelum in April, and then at UFC 289 in June, a pretty close fight against Nasruddin Imavov ended in the second round when there was an inadvertent clash of heads. The odds here, considering that Curtis won by knockout the first time they fought, maybe slightly surprising, but Allen is a strong favorite. He's -200, Curtis +170. That probably a nod to the momentum that Allen has built up since then. For those interested, the short notice nature of the matchup. For those interested, their first fight had Allen coming in as a whopping -350 favorite, Curtis like +275. So congrats to any of those who cashed in and put their kids through college by betting on Curtis in that one. Man, so I think I said this before the last Brendan Allen fight that we previewed. I'll probably keep saying it until he either starts losing or wins a title, but I don't know why I wrote Brendan Allen off as a busted prospect, but I feel dumb for having done so, because he is still just 28 years old. Yeah, like that's the one wild thing. He is still just 28. He is 7-2 in the UFC, and who's he lost to? He's lost to Sean Strickland, who became champ.
Yeah,
and that was at like 195-pound catch weight. It was like well outside of either guy's weight class. And then in the first matchup with Curtis, where, he was getting the better of a pretty competitive fight and then got clocked.
Yeah, he can avenge it now.
He can avenge it now, but even if he doesn't, he's no busted prospect.
No,
he's busted a couple of other like his 6-fight win streak includes wins over Jacob Malkoun, Andre Muniz, and Bruno Silva, all 3 of whom.
The Malkoun one's controversial, but yeah.
The Malkoun one controversial. Nothing controversial about him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nothing controversial about him tapping out Andre Muniz.
No. That was a great win at the time.
Mm-hmm. And you know what?
More importantly,
if you'd asked me during my weird Brendan Allen as a busted prospect phase, like in early 2022, I would have said, well, he's talented, but he's flaky and not durable. I'm not sure if clearly he's not flaky. You don't win 6 straight fights. You have to have a little bit of luck. Obviously, the Malkoun decision was very close, but you also don't win 6 fights in a row if you're flaky or not durable. It's the same lesson and the same thing I finally had to admit about Charles Oliveira once he finally started stringing together wins. Okay, he's not, a head case front runner anymore. But Allen, he has stopped giving fighters a chance to do their thing to him. Like there was no chance for Paul Craig to do Paul Craig things in their fight. Paul Craig has taken a whooping from bigger, more established fighters than Brendan Allen and found a way to beat them. No chance of that here. I know I picked Allen over Bruno Silva, but I'm sure on the broadcast, I recognize the upset potential that Silva could still clock Allen with one big shot, but no. Allen's he's a better fighter than I gave him credit for. He's a more consistent fighter. And just barely having turned 28 a couple months ago, he's really coming into his own. I like the Curtis rematch. I don't hate that fight at all. The Vettori fight I would have liked as well, as kind of maybe his last leg up to become undeniably a top 10 fighter. But as substitute fights go, this one will probably be more fun. Rewatching their whole first fight, it feels like it's a tougher ask for Curtis to replicate that than for Allen to be like, okay, I just need to do the same thing I did last time and not make those same couple of mistakes. And that's what I'm kind of leaning towards here. Curtis can, he's very undersized for 185 pounds. And against some fighters, ones who aren't good at managing distance, it doesn't matter. But Allen's gotten better at it. Allen is a tall fighter who fights even taller than he is. He just has a long reach. He does his best to keep fighters on the end of his jab and on the end of his kicks. Likes to use kicks as kind of a range finder and to stop other fighters' forward momentum in a similar way to a fighter that I've compared him to before, Luke Rockhold. And then all of that is just to keep his chin intact until either his opponent makes the mistake of taking him down or he sees an opportunity to jump on something. He's less of a conventional wrestler than a guy that will just see a good situation where he can try to take someone's back standing, slap on a guillotine, something like that, bringing the fight to he's much more of a scrambler than a wrestler. But Curtis's wrestling has always kind of been in his back pocket. He's underrated defensive wrestler for as little a guy as he is to basically pitch a no-hitter to Rodolfo Vieira, who wanted to take him down real bad for 3 rounds. Is impressive. He's an underrated offensive wrestler, but I don't think he's going to want that with Allen. Allen's become, he now has 4 rear naked chokes in a row, 5 in this run of 6, but he's also great at the whole front headlock series. He at least threatens with Darce chokes and guillotines very easily, uses his long arm as well. This is just one of those fights where I think Curtis would have to kind of thread the needle or find a big moment of fight changing offense to spring the upset. He did it last time, but Brendan's a better fighter, a more confident fighter than he was last time they fought. And I just think it's going to be an even just narrower window he would have to shoot through. Give me Allen to win a decision here where the rounds are individually a whole lot of fun. Maybe it's a fight where it's 49-46, but it's fun the whole time because that Curtis does have the potential for that fight-changing offense, but it never really comes. So yeah, give me Allen in a one-sided yet still very entertaining decision.
Yeah, it's so funny because when you talk about Brendan Allen, I think it's so crazy that he's only 28, probably because he has how much experience he has, but not just the guy's got almost 30 fights, but it's against, 6 years now or something like that, just going to get stud after stud after stud.
If I may, even his losses before getting to the UFC, Trevin Giles, Eric Anders, Anthony Hernandez. Those guys have had mixed results at the UFC level, but to run into those guys in LFA is brutal. And then wins, he wins over Aaron Jeffrey on the Contender Series. His last fight in LFA, he beat Moses Murrieta, who at the time was probably one of the top 8 prospects in the entire sport.
Shut your mouth. It's an inside joke for you guys that don't know that. Nice job though.
Please go ahead though.
dude's battle tested, and he's only 28, which is so crazy, probably because he has so much experience against good. You mentioned one of his losses was to Anthony Hernandez. Dude, if Chris Curtis couldn't do that fight, tell me that's not a great rematch. If Anthony Hernandez, I mean, Hernandez is the guy who kind of deserves a step up like this. You know how we both been backing Anthony Hernandez. So, he's really well rounded. You know, actually, what I'm saying, let me back up for a second. Besides only being 28, it's like now he's entering his prime, but it seems like he's been in the UFC forever, you know, or at least, you know, when you're a high level LFA, you know, champion and that's that you kind of you're basically on the cusp of thinking about you. Mm-hmm. So it's just weird that he's probably entering his best years now. He's a well-rounded fighter. He's a high output guy. He's a pressure striker. He gets stronger as each round moves along. You know, he's a very classic builder type fighter. Muay Thai striker. He hits very hard. I mean, like you mentioned like him being tall, but he's thick too. Like I like the comparison, his style, you know, his build to like a Luke Rockhold, where I don't think you realize how big he is until you're like around him. Mm-hmm. He does stand a little too tall. He can be a little hittable. He's one of these guys. He'll take a shot to move forward and land on some of his own, fighting behind a high guard defense. He can also make the mistake of overextending on his shots, which kind of got him hurt a lot in his young career. And he's taken, you know, we talk about having 30, you know, almost 30 fights already in his career is good experience, but on the same sense, it's also a lot of miles. So he's got, I mean, we talk about big, he's got really good power, incredible kicking game, which is, he was always a good kicker, but it has reached a different level since he's been in the UFC. Kicks to all ears about it. Some of the best calf kicks in the entire UFC. I mean, I go back to like the Sean Strickland fight. He lost that fight, but he had a lot of success kicking him. He's you talked about his wrestling, the underrated wrestler. He'll shoot for a takedown sometimes without a setup, which is the thing. But like you said, he's not this traditional explode through your hips kind of guy. He's just a guy who get a crib, you know, very Ben asking, get a scramble going and try to win those. You know, the funk style wrestling, they call it. Good, you know, very BJJ into his grappling. Good ground and pound when he's on top. He's a good Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner. Advances position on the back. He's got some slick back takes. I mean, I still think subbing Andre Muniz is good, though. You know, he's lost some fights, but subbing Andre Muniz is really good. He had a sweep off his back in that fight, which was impressive. Curtis is the opposite. He's not a big middleweight. He's a welterweight. He's small. One of those guys that he's benefited by moving up, like the power has gone with him up to middleweight, but still he's like a smaller guy. Southpaw, he's a boxer, he's a counter striker. My main issue with his striking, I've said this about him for a while, is he can be gun shy in so many fights, including his last fight, where which is kind of crazy because it became a war, but early on, he can sometimes not match his opponent's output, and he kind of gives away, he kind of cruises where he's like, I'm not getting hurt, I'm not losing. He did this against Calvin Gastelum. He did it against Joaquin Buckley, where he gave them close rounds. I mean, I know he had to knock Buckley out, but you know, I thought he lost the first round. He can also like kind of fight down to his competition and make it like a guy, you know, despite being way better, make a guy look better. Like he had a split decision against Marc-Andre Barriault in a fight that he was better in all the exchanges. He just didn't match Barriault's output. I think also the way he fights, because he rolls with punches, the optics are never good. It looks like he's getting hit more than he actually is. Like he realizes he's not getting hurt and hit, but I don't know if the judges are. He does best when he's in the phone booth and he's letting his hands go. When he's getting in the pocket, he's throwing tight, clean. That's the big thing about it. He's a clean boxer. When he lands accurate shots. He loves hooks and uppercuts. He loves slipping shots and then countering with uppercuts and hooks instead of coming back with like a straight shot of his own. So he's trying to win. He's trying to land that like knockout punch off a slip. I love that he rips the body. We saw that being such a big factor in the Rodolfo Vieira fight. He's got big punching power when he connects. I shouldn't say big. I think he's got, he can crack some guys. I think it's slightly overrated. I don't think he's as hard of a hitter as people think, but he had a nice streak of knocking guys out. With Brandon Allen being one of them. Because he's a pocket boxer, very like bob and weed plotting style. Sometimes he struggles with people who move a lot. Like Jack Hermanson, he really struggled to cut off the cage. He was getting visibly frustrated that it seemed like Hermanson was just going to pop shot him from the outside. He's a good, strong clinch fighter. That's what I thought was probably what got him the win against Marc-Andre Barriault, was how well he was doing when he was grabbing the back of the head, when he was dirty boxing it, because he keeps his base and he keeps everything tight. He can wrestle, but he doesn't look for wrestling enough. Almost never. He doesn't try to win rounds with his wrestling. More of a sprawl and brawl kind of guy. He's hard to take down. He showed that against Adolfo Vieira, who's a good wrestler. He does have good top game if he's on top. And he has a cardio. They go on all 15 minutes in a fight now. Of course, that's because he doesn't really waste too much energy, because he kind of conserves energy. Now, this is a 25-minute fight. I have no worry about Curtis gassing, because I've seen him fight 25 minutes in regional scenes. He fought in every regional scene. He was champion of everything. So I'm not worried about that. As far as the main event prediction, I like Allen to avenge his loss. But I think how he can win, I think of him having so many more avenues of victory. Like, one, he can just land one huge shot and put Curtis out. Like, that's one opportunity because of his power. Second one, he can use his movement and his kicks and kind of piece Curtis up from range, being the longer guy, kind of like what Jack Hermanson did. Third one, he can just out-volume Curtis, where Curtis is cruising and losing close rounds, but they go in favor of Allen. The fourth one is he turns it into the wrestling match and he out-grapples Curtis. That one I think is probably the least likely, but like, it could happen because it might be hard to get Curtis down, but if he can open up Curtis while Curtis starts throwing some big shots, gets underneath him, I can see Allen pressing that. Or probably the most likely is 5, and that's just adding a little bit of all the top 4. A little bit of grappling, a little bit of outside, a little bit more volume, a little bit of everything. When I flip it over to Curtis, I really only see one avenue of victory. He needs to get in the pocket. He lets his hands go, and he lands big shots, and he's probably going to need to hurt him. He's probably going to have to drop him. He's probably going to have to win a stoppage. It's probably less likely that he wins a decision, much less likely. So when you have like 6 doors, if this is the game show and we have 6 doors and Brad Allen's behind 5 of them, I'll take my chances. So I'll take Allen. I mean, I'm a Curtis fan. He's not a New Englander, but he's fought in this region. I've seen him fight so often here. He's tough, dude. So I think it's unlikely that Allen gets him out of there, but I say Allen wins a decision.
All right. And that is it. The Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC Fight Night 240. Allen versus Curtis 2. I've been Ben. He has been Keith. If this is your first time watching or listening to one of our previews, first of all, thank you. We hope you enjoyed it. We do our best to bring you a mix of in-depth analysis, serious picks, and the occasional historical or humorous aside. Please do like, subscribe, drop us a like. It costs you nothing. It makes us feel good. Drop us a comment. Keith and I both man the comment section. We would love to hear your take on these fights. Each of us picked a couple of upsets. So if you think we're way out on a limb on any of those, or you spot any upset value that we didn't, let us know. And if you're right, we will give you all the credit on the recap. Join us for the recap. We will be live on the Sherdog YouTube page about 10 minutes after the main event. Keith takes the captain's chair. We'll talk about all 13 fights. What was good, what was bad, what was surprising, what was controversial. There's always something. We'll talk about what's next for some of the notable winners as well as losers, and we'll talk with you. The live chat is open that whole time, so we are taking your questions, your comments, and your hot takes in real time. We have a growing community of friends that hang out with us after the fights, and we would love for you to be part of it. Between now and then, thank you once again for listening. Enjoy the rest of your week, and by all means, enjoy these fights.
don't care.